Well, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this special governance and operation council meeting to order. The date is December 16th, 2022. And oh, sorry, I was going by the date on the report here. Thank you. Okay, so December 20th, 2022. Thank you. And I'm going to hand the meeting over to our Chief Administrative Officer, Colin McClure, to take on the responsibility of presenting the utilities budget report. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor Jones, and thank you for those that may be joining us and not seeing right now. Yeah, we have a few that are joining us, so thank you for that. Publicly, because of the snow, we had a bit of a delay on getting things going here. So a couple of things right off the bat, Mayor Jones and council, is that we had sort of a late agenda item come up, and we wanted to get that in front of council because, first of all, some really good news. And I know that some were on council when we had brought this before, and it's something that had been carried forward. And that's this groutage missing link component that has not only trying to beautify that connection between where it ends and where we have the beautiful walking bridge, but there's also utilities that are involved to be worked on there. Now, at the time in reading the report, you will see that we actually had shovel ready. We had some money from CBT. We had a few things going on, but everything kind of got shut down with COVID. And so that's where we were able to divert some of that funding that CBT had. This is a new round, and they said we were, we had to go through a process, but we could apply, and we did bring that to council back in October 11th. That we were going to go through it's a bit of a different process. We had to have our plan presented. We did it all by Zoom again. It was a bit different participants were there. I guess they could watch it, but from that was CBT's process. They have come back to us now and said that we now are able to move to the next stage, which is fantastic news for us. And the few things that happened there on Trisha's side, she's just trying to get prepared because the timeline of getting this budget or the next stage is early in January. I think it's January 10th. So we didn't want to jam it right up against the council meeting on the 9th. And I thought, well, we're going to be talking about some of the utility work that's involved with this particular project anyway. I'm sensing that council would love to be part of seeing that area that's not completed, so that we have a nice flow from all the way in downtown there to the Esplanade all the way down to the walking bridge. So we have that before you. You can see on some of the notes that the director Davis had put through there that her and one of our managers, Dave Moorhead, also he was the one that presented at the CBT virtual forum. We're the ones that went through that, and that there's a few things that are going on right now. This one here is just a resolution, and the resolution is a little bit tighter than maybe the last one that we had. It was kind of like looking at what the CBT application asked for. We felt that this wording of this particular resolution is more in line with what is committing council. Like, not only do we say yes, we're going to go to the grant, but yes, we're going to put in our funds towards the infrastructure, and we're committing to that, and having a resolution from council that says that's what we need to do. There is some other components as well, that the active transportation is also something that is completed, and that will be presented to council in January-ish as well. And that again to will be manager Moorhead will be leading us through that active transportation which he was talking about. So again, I don't know if anybody has any questions on that. I also thought it was important, and maybe some of you are already fully aware of the photos as far as what we're talking about in the area, and some of the links that are on that report. So it should be at the end of the report. There should be a couple of documents there that you can kind of get a sense of what the plan is, or what the project will look like. I mean, again, as Director McIsaac would say, stuff underground isn't pretty and no one gets to see it, but we do need to upgrade it, and it has an expensive component to it. But again, we'll address a bit of that when we go through utilities this afternoon here. So I've said a lot. Mayor, I think we would need someone to first and second, if you want to get that motion on the table.
Okay. So the recommendation is before you. Can I get someone to make that recommendation? Councillor Martin, second Councillor Benson. Any questions or comments on the recommendation?
Just a question. So basically what we're looking at is that we're doing kind of a twofold. We're one, upgrading infrastructure that needs to be upgraded regardless, and beautifying an area to make it more, desirable for everybody, more walkable. Now, in regards to the costs, though, we're going to be responsible for anything above, if we get allocated the full ask, we are responsible for the balance of the funds of those infrastructure upgrades.
That's correct.
And has that been, have we looked at the difference in what it was before to now? Like, what has that budget difference before COVID and now?
So yes, there is, you'll see that we did the increase. I think we were at 1.25, we're now at 1.75. And that's mostly on the cost pressures of utility work more than anything. And so that's why in building this budget and in bringing the utility side at the 1.75, we are saying that we would be responsible. Our expectation is in building this that work would cost the city about 1.25 million. And that's both for the sewer utility component and the water utility component. And of course, if you're going to get, it makes sense, and CBT is always wise on this. If you're going to go in and be tearing things up, if you've got old utilities in there, now's the time to do it, especially because the reweighting and the paving and all that is really so expensive. So no sense in doing it twice.
And does that area service a substantial area? Like, is that one of the mains coming through in that area?
Yeah, that's part of the loop from the water main that crosses the pedestrian bridge.
Okay.
So it comes across the pedestrian bridge onto Riverside Ave through Groutage, back onto Bay Avenue.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I just had a comment or a question as well, because we have had, increase in costs for construction, etc. I'm just wondering if the 15% contingency is that common? Seems a little bit high.
Well, in today's world, when some of it even on we met with the CAOs over in Cascor last week, and Cascor has done some work on what the municipal pricing index, so not the CPI, but a municipal one, and it's running about 5.5% right now. And that's kind of the cost of concrete, cost of aggregate, and those sorts of things. And again, one of the challenges with any of this work is the unknown. As soon as you rip something up, it's not, oh, hey, usually this is perfect. It's like, where did this pipe come from? Or, where's this linked to? And it's usually inevitable. So I know that 15% may seem high, but it is, I think it's conservative. Maybe not conservative enough today with the way things have kind of been moving around and what may be going on in that area. But I think that there's a confidence level that having that there, it would be a wise decision.
Okay. Councillor Butler.
Sure. And timeline, like 2023 is with all the other work going on, feel comfortable that it can be completed?
Yeah, that's the goal.
And it's a great question, Councilor, but we are also beholden on when CBT sort of rolls us out sometimes, and they also on their side usually don't tend to have like as tight a timelines as some of the others, although this was ready to go. So it's one of those projects at least that the design and that kind of work has been done. So it is as you hear often is that shovel ready. This is as shovel ready as going to happen in the city of Trail.
Okay. If there's no other questions, I'll call for the question. All those in favor? Okay, opposed, not seeing none. Okay, so all those in favor of the recommendation. Okay, sorry.
They were all.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we move on to the
Yes.
utilities.
Yes, and so just
Presentation, thank
yeah,
you.
and just a bit of an agenda here kind of thing. we know unfortunately that we didn't get you into the plant, and now that it's snowed, we're basically, since we thought we would go up, I think from the day that we had our first field trip. And we will have something come springtime, I think here, that will be the plan. But in the meantime, Director Kaiser has gone through, he's got a presentation, kind of a high level, just on what our two systems are, what they're involved with. He has a few slides, just on a breakdown of kind of what makes up the operating costs of the two utilities we're going to discuss. And then I've got sort of more of the steering documents, and sort of, this is a work that, this is how I've presented in the past. So there's some familiarity to me, it would be new to council, it would be new to trail. And part of it is not to scare people per se, but it is sort of kind of laying out a bit of reality. And when I say that, meaning I know that many of you kind of have talked about in running for council, like worry about infrastructure or wondering about infrastructure. So we're going to get a bit of an education today. So again, we're going to let Director McIsaac kind of go through his water and sewer piece. I will talk about financials, but of course we'll have the director here just on some of these projects. And we know that we are not exactly where we want to be on our asset management planning, and but there is hope, and that's what I let Director McIsaac speak to the hope that he has and what he's seeing in the work that has been invested in the last little while. And again, I think as we look out into the future, I think it's important to kind of get a sense of the reality of some of the infrastructure deficit that we have. And it's something that we'll have to work through together. It doesn't mean, you know, it means you may not be able to bite off all we want, but I wanted to kind of show you based on what we got from the director as some of the capital costs that we have. And when you have a utility that has 80 kilometers worth of, say, water line or sewer line, you're never ever going to get to the end of the census. By the time you get to, you know, 80, you're starting back at kilometer one kind of thing. And much like we are through these Kootenays, we're a pretty old community. So we've got a lot of pipes in the ground that are old. And so, yes, we want to get at this and be proactive. And so anyway, I'm going to pass it over, but before I do that, I'm going to get a glass of water. So if you see my head here, I'm going to pass it over to Director Isaac and get him to get working on his side of the presentation.
Okay, thank you, CAO Clerk. Mayor Jones and Council, thank you for having me today. So as the CAO gave a quick overview, I am going to give you somewhat of a quick tour of the water and sewer utilities. Like Colin alluded to, we were supposed to meet out at Public Works, and I was going to take in a big tour of the water plant, and that's really the flagship of what we do out there. But as far as water goes, so we'll settle with this. I have a bit of a PowerPoint presentation with a bit of other technology mixed in there. So hopefully I get the other tech to flash up in the background and this thing runs smoothly. So we'll see how it goes. So to start, so water and sewer utility for the city of Trail. What you see here is the inside of the filter bed room at the water treatment plant. If you've been lucky enough to have a tour up there in the past, it's a very clean facility and it's a nice place to visit. So within the utilities department, they're the crew that looks after the water and sewer. We've got on the left here, we've got, let me see if I can get my pointer up. We've got, of course, the utility superintendent is Craig Spears. He would normally be presenting the utility stuff to you guys, but we're going to talk a bunch about budget later, so I'll save him that. So we have the water treatment plant up there. We have 3 operators. We have a chief operator. His name is Mike Oliver. And below that, we have Doug Hogg. He's a level 3 treatment plant operator. And we have Jen Doust, and she is what we call a multidiscipline operator in training. So her focus is going to be water treatment when she moves on to level 1, but right now she's a certified water operator. From there, we move over to the streets utilities department, typically called the plumbing shop. In there, we have a certified plumber pipe fitter. His name is Ryan Dean. And then we move over to utilities distribution, and those are the guys that typically deal with the water and sewer pipe repairs. We got Carl Martin is the water distribution system chief operator up there. Under him, we have Brad Martin. He's a level 2 operator, and we've got another multidiscipline operator in training. His name is Joseph Baker. And Joe is going to focus on water distribution and wastewater collection monies. Moving on to his level 1 certifications. We also have a dedicated Vector operator / utilities laborer. That's Dean Martin. So it's really the Martin shop there. And then on the right is electrical, but we're not talking about that today, so I'm going to leave those guys alone. I'm sure they'll be happy that I'm not talking about them. So water system overview. Here is a map of all the water distribution mains in the city of Truro. And within that, I'll move right on to the water system component. So sorry, I'm looking at the screen and kind of not talking to you guys, but I have to have my laptop closed to get this thing to work properly. So within the water system, the major components we have are the river intake, the Columbia River intake, the water treatment plant up in Sunningdale. We have 8 reservoirs throughout the city. We have 6 water booster stations. We have 83 plus kilometers of water mains. We have about 3,500 water service connections. We have about 317 fire hydrants and 964 water main isolation valves. Of course, with the 3,500 water service connections, you get 3,500 service valves as well, right at the curb stop. So with that, I'm going to try some technology here to get us to be able to jump over to my Google Earth water system tour. So let's see if this will work out. This is the next best thing to driving around in a car. So the city of Truro, if you're not aware, we have 2 distinct water sources. We have the Columbia River, which is a surface water source, and we have the Bear Creek well, which is a groundwater source. So with that, we have a division of the water systems. So it's a condition of our operating permit with Interior Health that we don't blend the water. Why? Is because the treatment plant water is chlorinated and the Bear Creek well water is unchlorinated. So you can't blend those in the system for various operational and health reasons. So we have those separated, and this is generally the dividing line of where the west system fed by the water treatment plant lies and where the east system from the Bear Creek well lies. So the water treatment plant feeds Sunningdale, East Trail, West Trail, Tadna. And the Bear Creek system feeds Lower and Upper Shavers Bench, Merle Heights, Glen Mary, and all of Waneta, including Waneta Junction and Waneta Village. So from there, we're going to focus on the west side system. So it all starts at the Columbia River intake. This was built in 1993. And it houses 3 300 horsepower pumps. And these pumps are what draw water from the river and pump it up to the water treatment plant. Up at the treatment plant, the plant was built in 1994, and it has a design capacity of 20 million liters per day. And we put through as much as 24 million liters a day through the plant. The plant itself is pretty simplistic in design. It's an anthracite over sand rapid rate filtration system, and it has pre and post chlorination and a UV disinfection system. So we meet all of the current day IH standards for disinfection. From there, the processed water as it goes through the plant gets pushed out of the plant with some transfer pumps, and it sends it over to the Sunningdale Reservoir. And that reservoir is the primary holding tank for all treated water going into the system. And the tank is designed in such a way that you get contact time with the chlorine inside this tank. So there's baffles in it. And when it goes out into the system, the water has spent enough time in the tank that it meets the chlorination requirements. It's one of our larger tanks. It holds 3.78 million liters. And I think that's the second largest one in the system. We built a new reservoir a couple of years ago, and it holds a little bit more, but we'll get to that in a second. From there, the water leaves the Sunningdale Reservoir and it goes through, I don't have a pointer on this one, unfortunately. So it goes from there down into Sunningdale and it runs along to Charles Lakes Drive, and it runs down Second Avenue, crosses the Victoria Street Bridge and goes up to Rosin Avenue. And from there it splits and some of the water goes into the West Trail Booster Station and some of the water goes up the West Trail Approach and into the Tadnac Reservoir. So all of the water that feeds into Tadnac from Sunningdale is fed into there by gravity alone. It's not boosted, it's not pumped at all. So although the connection point, there is a connection point near the West Trail Booster, it's not being fed by the West Trail Booster. It's bypassed by valving and it's going up the West Trail Approach. So then the water that's going into the rest of the West Side reservoirs goes through the West Trail Booster. And this is it down by the chain up area. It was built in 1993 and it houses 3 75 horsepower pumps. And those pumps are what boost the water up into the West Side reservoirs. So from the West Trail Booster, it goes up and into the largest reservoir in the system, which is the Coleman Street Reservoir. This reservoir was built in 2012, and it holds 3.95 million liters. It's quite a large reservoir, and it's a really nice steel and glass lined reservoir. From there, water travels down into the West Side system and into the Bin Street Booster Station. I don't have a picture of the outside of the booster station. It's really hard to see anyway. It's just a little staircase down off of Bin Street here. And then this booster station pushes water up through West Trail and into the upper and lower Lookout reservoirs. So here's a picture of the top of the lower Lookout reservoir. And it's another one which is hard to see. As you're driving by, you can barely recognize it's there. And then if you go up Lookout Street a little bit more, you run into Upper Lookout Reservoir, and that's an old concrete reservoir that was built in 1966, and it's quite small. It's 0.45 million liters, but I do believe that's a little bigger than Lookout. Lower Lookout is 0.22 million liters. So they're quite small little reservoirs up there. And one day we're looking to replace those with a singular reservoir, but that's on the big wish list. So from there, we head over to what we call Rockland Ave Booster. And it's literally this little building that sits right below Rockland Avenue at the end of McBride Street. It's very hard to see. You probably walk by it 100 times and don't know what it is down there. And it's just a little booster station that houses one 15 horsepower pump. This little booster station was built back in the 1950s, and it's designed to transfer water treatment plant process water to the east side system when the Bear Creek well is down. So we take the Bear Creek well down once a year so that we can push chlorinated water through the entire system for disinfection purposes. And then we also take the well down when we have to do pump servicing in there. So it comes down, it comes out of service a number of times. The well comes out of service a number of times, and this Rockland Ave Booster is activated, and it does a good job of feeding water to the east side system in non-peak demand situations, right? So it doesn't keep up with demand in August, so we try not to shut it down then. So that this booster station just stays off until we need it. So it's just sitting there, not doing much of anything other than waiting for us to energize it. So from there, we move over to the Bear Creek well. The Bear Creek well pumps water out of the Bear Creek aquifer. And it does that with a single pump in there. It's a 400 horsepower pump. It's quite large, produces quite a bit of water. And one of our projects we're going to speak about later is twinning of the well. So the well was built in 1979. Groundwater wells typically have a lifespan of about 30 years. So we've exceeded that. We constantly look at the well itself, and we have professionals come in to evaluate it, and the well is doing very well. It's a very prolific well, meaning that it's still producing great quantities of water as compared to the design parameters. So we're doing good. But as with any well, they don't last forever. So we don't want to be caught in a situation where the well fails and we don't have a redundant well there. So we're looking at twinning that system. For the Bear Creek well, water is fed through Juanita up to the Green Gables Reservoir. If you've ever seen it, it's a reservoir, concrete reservoir that's up above Canadian Tire. And this is just a picture of the roof of it, looking down the valley. But if you're down below on the front side, all you see is a concrete wall. It doesn't really look like much of anything. And that reservoir it's new. We built it the city built it in 2004. I wasn't with the city at the time. So they built that to service the Walmart build and whatever other development was happening in Juanita Junction at the time. And it services Canadian Tire as well. So, and all of that area in Juanita Junction. So it's a nice big reservoir. It's 1.54 million liters, and it's working well. Other reservoir that is fed by the Bear Creek well is the Juanita Reservoir. This is it. It's just an old steel reservoir built in 1978. It has a capacity of 1.59 million liters, so it's quite a large reservoir as well. The Bear Creek, it's the Juanita Reservoir, called the Bear Creek Reservoir because it's on Bear Creek Road. Anyway, the Juanita Reservoir and the Green Gables Reservoir balance each other out as well because they're at similar elevations. So that's designed intentionally like that. The Bear Creek well also feeds the Glenmurray Reservoir, which if you've ever been up there is up above Belisky Park. It's an old reservoir built in 1961. It's very small for what we're asking it to do. It's only 1.13 million liters. And in the summertime, that reservoir drains and empties to our set points, not completely full and not completely empty, but it turns over about 12 times a day. So just about every 2 hours, that reservoir is filling and emptying because it's undersized for what we're asking it to do. Of course, back in 1961, it wasn't, but today it is. So a project that we'll speak about a little later is replacing the Glenmurray Reservoir. So from the Glenmurray Reservoir, water is fed to Laburnum Drive, and that's pushed through a little lift station or booster station, which the Laburnum Drive booster, it has two 35 horsepower pumps, and they have little VFD drives built into them. So they just run constantly and just develop pressure on Laburnum Drive. There's not enough elevation difference between the Glenmurray Reservoir and Laburnum Drive to have good operating pressure. So we have to pressurize the system, and that's done through Laburnum Booster. The last component of the water system that I want to talk about is the Merle Heights Booster. So that is also fed water from the Glenmurray Reservoir and the Bear Creek well. That booster station was built in 1977. It has two small 7.5 horsepower pumps in there, and it's a recirculating system. So they run constantly as when the pressure in the Merle Heights loop drops to a certain set point, they fire up, but they essentially run 24 hours a day, just pressurizing this water loop here that runs up around Merle Heights and into the center as well. So keeps pressure going there. And that's about my overview for the water system. So before I move on with the sewer stuff, any questions on the water system? No? Pretty straightforward stuff. Okay.
Chris, maybe just like you, or not, I'm just sort of remembering from our last tour, but there's 2 licenses for water from the Columbia, or just?
Well, we have a primary license and we have a number of licenses that were remaining from the wells.
And so there's I guess what I'm getting at, there is sufficient water for demands and trail, like
Yes.
even in the height of
Yeah,
Pouring
our
concrete
primary
system.
license is enough to cover that, but we also still have a water license from the well that was.
I remember you sharing a stat with the tower about how sort of many liters are used in Canada than in BC, and then Trail trumps that with like
We,
1,300 liters a day or something like that.
yeah, 1,300 liters a day per person, and the national average is 348 or something like that. BC average is 650.
Yeah.
I don't have current stats to give you today on
Yeah.
where we're at.
That's sort of similar.
I don't think we've had major reductions in our consumption, that's for sure. We have some reduction. I think we're down around 1,000 or maybe right around 1,100 liters per person per day. But of course, that we don't have demand side management, so we don't have like water meters at your house, so it's hard to measure where that water is going, right? So it's kind of a skewed stat because the national average is based on residential consumption.
Mhm.
But I can't tell you how much we use at your house. Because all of our water is measured in the system, and that takes in all the industrial, commercial, institutional, all of our parks irrigation, and all of our residential. So it's a little harder to decipher. However, it is a big number. I mean, we gotta fathom, we're using greater than 1,000 liters a day per person and Trail in the peak demand. In the wintertime, of course, our consumption falls off the map, just like anybody.
Mhm.
We do have a lot of green space in Trail, and we
Irrigated.
like to keep it green, so we pour the water to it.
A question, so for infrastructure upgrades, so let's say, our community's growing, right?
Mhm.
So from what we're looking at, there should be no issues for us to grow at what kind of rate based on the water that we've currently got.
Well, that is a question I'll have to get back to you with.
Okay,
Haven't looked at that so much because we've been so limited with developable land, so it's just not a number I have.
I was, no problem. I just, I was thinking just because of changes with stuff that's been announced for, some suites and whatnot with the premier. I just want to make sure if people start, applying to do that, do we have capacity,
Oh, yes.
to do that, right?
We do have a lot of system capacity right now, so we're not maxing out our peak day demand ability. Of course, if we have to feed the entire system from one side or the other, that's where we run into issues. But if we're developing one side or the other, then we do have some capacity there.
And there's a few things that can get worked on too, because most of the communities don't have meters, and you do have a place like Casco that does, and that's, but many don't. But you can put in some zone meters, so you can kind of get a sense of like, so that Merrill Heights, it's not quite likely that we could kind of get a usage in and out of what's happening with that, and then we only got residential, right? So that might just give us a bit of that standard piece. And I think it's going to be important because obviously water conservation, anytime you have to treat and pump and that sort of thing, and anything we can do that to help our residents come on side with this. But it also certainly happens seeing that the province as well wants to know kind of what are you doing. Some kind of think the catch-all is to go a meter, and of course, like you think about having to put a meter into 3,500 homes, and then now you've got to build that out, and now you need another employee and doing meter readings and things like that. But it is sometimes I have seen in the past there was some pressure on communities, kind of on that demand management of like, well, you're looking for a grant to do this, but really, what are you showing us about what you've done for conservation? So again, these will all be things that I think next number of years here we'll get a better handle. Be able to answer some of these questions.
Yeah, it's hard to develop a business case that makes sense for metering every single unit in Trail because we do have quite a prolific water system. So
However, we do meter a lot of.
we do have a lot of zone metering. Just to be clear, we can't do Merrill Heights, sorry.
Okay.
See you in the clear. It's a loop system, so it just continually pumps, so we can't do Merrill Heights, but we do have system meters. So we know how much water we're putting into the system, right? In certain areas. So we do meter to an extent, but it just doesn't make any sense for us to do every single residence, that's all. So.
And the other part too that's quite fascinating is, and it would make sense when you think about it, is you go to build these new homes or you're going to put these pictures in, you don't have sort of like the old style where you had like, 12-gallon kind of toilet flushing anymore, right? It's like whatever faucet's coming off or whatever toilet you've got also has, been restricted in the sense that is also putting on some water demand when you are doing a more efficient appliances and those sorts of things as well, making a big difference in kind of yes, you're growing, but it's actually not like, it's more the older homes that are kind of leaking with the water or using the water. So, anyway, something to keep in mind.
Just one other question, Chris.
Yes.
On the gravity fed model for Tadmac, how high approximately can you go up the hills using the gravity model, like before you have to install pump stations? Like,
Well,
that's the wonder of Vancouver, right? Is that the reservoir sits way above it, even the tallest tower, right?
in general, you create about 4 PSI pressure every 10 feet.
10, okay.
So our standard in trail is 30 PSI at the curb. So you would have to go you have to go 80 to 100 feet high. So say at 100 feet, you were putting out.
You have to go to the station, and that would be at the height of that tower, going above kind of type thing, or the station itself.
Yeah, so the base of the reservoir in Tadmac is greater than 100 feet to the first service
Okay.
down in the system. Yeah. Okay, so we'll try to get back to my presentation here. Okay, so we will move on to the wastewater collection system, so the sanitary sewer. So you all know we don't own a wastewater treatment plant in Trail. That is owned and operated by the regional district, and it's funded by the 3 communities which contribute to it. So what you see here is a combination of all the city sanitary sewer lines, plus we are also showing some regional collection system lines, which are not isolated out of my drawing, unfortunately. So maybe we'll work to get that sorted out in the background. But when you're looking at that, the majority of what you see is City of Trail. So within our system, we have about 89 kilometers of sanitary sewer mains, about 3,500 sewer service connections. So your sewer services and your water services typically go together. We have about 1,000 sanitary manholes and 6 sanitary sewer lift stations throughout the city. We also have 2 areas which are still using on-site disposal. So Tadmac, for one, uses the cesspit system, and Juanita Junction area, and some residences and businesses along Old Juanita Road are still on independent septic fields. A number of years ago, the city installed a wastewater collection system and a lift station down in Juanita to service the Juanita Junction build out for Walmart at the time. And when that line was built, there is a force main, but there's also a twinned gravity sewer which runs down. It collects all the sewer up behind the mall in the Juanita Village, and it drags it all down Old Juanita Road and puts it into that lift station. And that was necessary because there just wasn't enough flow with just the commercial development that was happening at the time. So when there's more build out there and there's more residential flow going into that one lift station, then that can all be separated out. But in the interim, there's a gravity system that runs here, and every property that fronts the gravity system was provided with a sewer service and an option to connect, not a mandatory connection. It was just an option to connect, and not everybody has opted to connect. So there are still some septic fields along Old Juanita Road, but the majority of Juanita Junction down Theater Road, 9th Street, there is no sewer connection down there. So they're all on septic fields. A number of years ago, there was a proposal by a resident to do a local area improvement and put in a wastewater collection system along Theater Road area, but there wasn't enough support from the other locals because they deemed their septic fields were sufficient, so that didn't happen. Moving on from that, I have another system tour for you. So my technology seems to be working here. Hopefully nobody's getting vertigo from all the moving around on the screen. So I'm just gonna start on the far extents here. We'll go up to Sunningdale, and in Sunningdale, there's a sewage lift station. And looks like this. If you see it, it's a fenced in compound now with some power control panels up top, and the pumps are down in the hole in what we call a lift station. So on the water system, the water pumps are booster stations because they're just adding system pressure, but in sewer systems, they're lift stations. Because we're not really boosting any pressure, we're just lifting it over the hole and pushing it down somewhere else. So all of that sewage is pushed down along the boulevards, along Hazelwood Drive, down again Charles Lakes Drive. And then they go down Jarrow Park, and it discharges into a large manhole, which is at the end of Gopal Street, down behind Guestcan. And then from there, it goes gravity across to Robertson Street lift station. And this lift station is again just a fence compound. All the lift stations, all you see above ground obviously is the power control panels and a compound that's fenced off. So that's what you see. It's right down the side. What is it, Cairo Manor?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
So along behind the backside of the sidewalk and the riverbank, there's a big lift station in there. That's Robertson lift station lifts boost sewer out from there, and it runs along Columbia Avenue, and it dumps into a gravity sewer system up by the Aquatic Center. We also have a small lift station, Clark Street lift station. Inside of that, we have two little 5 horsepower pumps, and this is all you see from the end of Clark Street because it's actually down on the riverbank. So that's just a little control panel. It only collects the sewage from these houses, and it's boosted up and into that line as well that Robertson pushes sewage into. We also have a little lift station at Butler Park, and it literally collects the water and wastewater from Butler Park. It looks like this. It was a transplanted lift station that came out of the old McDonald's site. So we reused these lift stations, just moved it from there down to here, and it pumps all summer long and pumps up into the system here, and then just gets forced up with the greater force main. So before we move along, all of that sewage that's collected along the east side of the city goes up to somewhere around here in the gravity force main system, and then it goes gravity down to the billboards. I don't know if you've seen the billboards down on Columbia Avenue. And then maybe they're more over here. And then down below that, there's in the operator world, there's a notorious manhole number 12, which is a regional district manhole, and all of the sewage dumps into there, and then it goes gravity along the Columbia River. There's a service road built below Glenmary, and it goes all the way along there to what is affectionately known as the Glenmary Lift Station, which is right around here. And then this is a regional function, a regional facility, and that pushes all of the sewer from all three communities, Roslyn, Warfield, and Trail. It collects it and it pushes it up down the highway 3B, and up the RV Park Road and into the Columbia Pollution Control Center. So that's a whole bunch of sewage that gets collected from a whole bunch of people, and it all runs down along the gravity system, which is the regional line. Okay, so we'll move on to the next bit is the city's Juanita sewage lift station, which I spoke a bit about earlier. That was installed to manage the build out in the Juanita Junction area. And again, that pushes sewage from this area up into the Columbia Pollution Control Center. So that's the receiving site for all of the sewage in the city of Trail. It's got two 39 horsepower pumps that run alternately. It's a fairly new station. Sorry, I forgot to put the year on here. It was installed in 2004 as well. So it's going to run for a lot of years before it needs any work, hopefully. And then we have the RV park lift station. It collects the sewage from the AM4 Plus building, the campground, and the sewage treatment plant administration building. Comes down and it just runs up along the roadway and then is pumped into the plant. One item that I forgot to speak about, and I must have taken it off my my display for some reason, is the sewage flow meter. So we have a sewage flow meter located down on the river. It's in a manhole that's down behind the Trail Memorial Center. And that flow meter measures all the sewage that comes from Rivervale, Oasis, and Tech. So all the sewage going into the system is all metered. From there, we subtract out the flow from Rivervale, Oasis, and we bill Tech for their contribution to the system. So that happens on a monthly billing cycle. So that is the extent of my wastewater collection system tour. Any questions?
Oh, no, I was gonna say, so all of West Trail then goes across the pedestrian bridge?
All of West Trail goes across the pedestrian bridge. So how the system works on the west side is so the regional system is divided into the 3 communities that contribute. So all of the sewage, all the sewer lines that come from Roslyn to where they meet Warfield is all paid for by Roslyn. And then all of the lines that run through Warfield to Trail. So from Warfield down, there's shared contribution from Roslyn and Warfield. And then everything that runs through Trail is a shared contribution by the 3 communities. And they're all flow based. So, through lots of iterations of how we're going to pay for it, it all came down to flow. So there's a flow meter right above Warfield. So it measures what's going into the system from Roslyn. And then there's another flow meter located at the Bocce pits. So if you ever go down there, that's a little hard to see here, but there is a flow meter located right in here, and it's on the regional service line. So we know the flow coming into Trail, and we know the flow leaving Trail at the Glen Mary lift station, the sewage lift station. So separate that out, and then we get billed for all of that flow in between. So all of our flow from the west side is drained into the regional sewage line at one point or another, either through as it runs down Roslyn Avenue or in downtown. So somehow it's all connected, and it makes its way into the regional line, which again is on the riverbank, and it starts roughly over here, and it flows all the way down to the old bridge. And under the old bridge is what is called the Murray Park lift station. It's a rather large lift station, and it pushes all the sewage from Roslyn, Warfield, and the west side of Trail, and it pushes it up along a new sewer force main, which we installed with the pedestrian bridge. So it runs all along Riverside Avenue, and it crosses under the pedestrian bridge. And again, it pops up over onto Columbia Avenue and drains into the gravity sewer up here as well. So if you're ever driving down Columbia Avenue over by the Aquatic Center to the billboards, and you see some sewage discharging from a manhole, because there's a lot of flow going into these systems, and as you increase flows and you don't increase your sewage pipe sizes, of course you have the occasional surcharging. So,
And that's manhole 12. Would that be?
no, that's the one down on the riverbank. The ones that surcharge are the ones up on the road, so they're very visible.
Okay.
So unfortunately it happens every now and again, not very frequently, but
Rainstorm?
rain events, we do have some I&I issues still in the systems. All communities are working very hard to eliminate that. So we have far fewer surcharging events now than when I first started up at the city back in 2005. So we've all done a lot of good work with inflow and infiltration reduction. So reducing that stormwater inflow.
A lot of times, when they built them, they would have had the stormwater connect right into the sewer water. So that's why getting that to go to its own storm, please, because you can kind of probably like keep that into the ground or holding tank or get more to the river.
Stormwater,
So,
direct discharge to the river, yes, yeah. Yeah. Okay, did that answer your question?
Yes.
That was part of my question too. And then it runs along the regional line that runs along the riverbank to the Glen Mary Lift Station.
Yes.
And then that's operated by the RDK. How big is that?
It
That must
is.
be a massive pump.
There are a number of pumps in there. I believe it's a 3-pump system again. They're 250 horsepower pumps. If I recall, it sounds awfully large for sewage lift stations. Maybe 125 horsepower pumps. We replaced them once back in 2010 before the city of Trail used to operate the Columbia Pollution Control Center and components. We used to operate it under contract to the regional district, and we handed back over operation to the regional district in 2010 era. So I haven't been in touch with that in a while, but there are, it's a whole bunch of liquid waste going through that
Yeah.
station on a daily basis for sure.
it is interesting, and in some aspects, if you get a tour of the plant, you know, I went in and I expected something completely different than what I
Yeah.
saw. And I don't know if any of you have been in, and you kind of think, well, what's it gonna look like, or what kind of product, you know, and it's like, it's more water than you would ever kind of think, you know, kind of grayish in color, but it's not maybe what you would think would be kind of in your system sort of thing. It's quite interesting if you're there. Smells one other thing, but
Yeah.
the product itself is not what you might have thought as far as consistency would be.
And then Chris, you were talking about I&I, that's inflow.
Inflow and infiltration. So inflow is direct inflow of stormwater through like CO McClure through combined sewers,
Okay.
which was a real thing back in the day. And infiltration is just broken lines and groundwater is seeping into the lines. So
Where's the discharge then? Right in along the riverfront or somewhere?
So the processed water from the Columbia Pollution Control Center comes back down the RV Park Road. It's actually their road. I just call it the RV Park Road because their RV Park is there. And then it discharges out into Rock Island into the river. So when the river is really low, you can see it bubbling up down there.
Oh, okay.
And it's wastewater which has met all of their permitting requirements. Right now, of course, I'm not here to speak about the regional service, but I will quickly. The Columbia Pollution Control Center is a primary treatment center, and we've been mandated by the province to go to a secondary treatment system. That process has been developed through the liquid waste management plan. It's gone out. We've secured funding and gone to tender. It's gone to tender, and we're just waiting to build. So we're utilizing the same site, and we're just going to put a whole bunch of very cool, if you're into the wastewater thing, unfortunately, that's what I do. So a bunch of very cool technology is going to go onto that site. So we're going to build out that site itself and go to secondary treatment. When you go to secondary treatment, of course, the odor reduction is there. There's odor controls, and there's just a cleaner bit of discharge that comes out of there. So once it's built, it'll be I think it's a cool facility to visit myself right now. Of course, any treatment plant, wastewater treatment plant, has some odor to it. It's really odorous when you're pressing the solids, so avoid the pressing days. But if you go up there now, I mean, it's got an odor, but once we go to secondary treatment, it'll be essentially odor-free. And it is a clean plant, but it'll be a super clean plant that won't have an odor to it, so you'll actually feel like it's clean. So, yeah, it's a well-managed facility. It's well-run, so kudos to their operators. It's good. So, and it's good for the region that we're going to secondary treatment.
So
Okay.
how much bigger do you think that plant's going to be then with the upgrade?
Well, I actually have a drawing hidden in my files here, but it's just going to consume this part here. So
Okay.
where there's some space, they're going to put new buildings. And where these are the old digesters, yeah. So these digesters are going to change the look of them. These are some primary and secondary settling tanks, and there's some scrapers in there. Of course, chlorine disinfection goes into it and all that. So this is, you know, the aerial will look significantly different in 5 years when it's done, but the footprint is going to be different too, because it's going to pretty much occupy, you know, any available space is going to have something new sitting on top of it, because it's kind of confined for going to secondary treatment. It's a big process. And the confines to the site are what are stopping us from going to tertiary treatment immediately, because the cost of the technology to put tertiary level treatment on such a small footprint is just overwhelming, right? I mean, if you had tons of space, you could put all kinds of good equipment out there that's affordable, but when you have to start stacking stuff, that's when you get into some real costs. So, but yeah, so it's going to fill up that site. There'll be quite a bit of equipment laid out on here.
Thanks.
Okay, anything else on sewer? Love talking about it. Okay, so to continue with my presentation, I'm going to quickly speak about some budgeting stuff, and I'm going to be really fast, and CEO McClure is going to take over and tell us all we need to know. So this is my proposed 2023 operating budget for the water and sewer world. This still has to go to CEO McClure for approval, so I'm just throwing this up here to give you some ideas of what the numbers are. So we're looking at $1.7 million for water system operation and maintenance, and about $700,000 for sewer system. Significant reduction in, or difference in price, because we don't manage or operate a wastewater treatment plant. Those numbers would be looking significantly more skewed if we did.
And this is just the operating.
This is just operating. This is no capital involved in this at all. So inside of our budgets, I just wanted to give you an idea of how it looks, the breakdown of how we spend the money once we get the budget. So the majority of the budget is labor. 54% of the water budget is labor. And you may be wondering, well, why is that when, you know, we have so much equipment to maintain? But up at the water treatment plant, the majority of the funding there goes to labor. We have 3 operators up there full time, but you're not doing a ton of emergent work at the water plant. There's lots of planned stuff that we manage with capital projects. So out in the water system, we have lots of emergent stuff. So if we didn't have a water treatment plant, that labor component would be a lot less.
It is interesting to know the utilities, because that's one of the things is the power that we, you know, we think about all of the pumping that we are doing in all
Yes.
these different places. It's,
Yeah.
it adds.
Yeah, and we're constantly looking for power efficiencies. However, with you know, I was speaking with CEO earlier and just explaining that the power at the Bear Creek well can't be managed all that readily, because the Glenmurray Reservoir turns over so many times in a day that the pumps at the pump at the Bear Creek well is running constantly to fill that reservoir. So you're running your pump all the time during peak demand. So you don't have any savings there. So if we had a larger reservoir up in Glenmurray that we could fill during low electrical demand, we could start working with Fortis to start getting some efficiencies and savings there. So, and that's stuff that we're looking at as we move forward.
What are the contracted services?
Those are contractors that are required to do pump repairs for us, like millwrights and such. I would have to open up the budget to see exactly where I've got all that laid out. But it's also a component of the snow removal for the system, for the water and sewer systems.
And it can be too, sometimes if we have a repair or work that has to be done as for repair and maintenance rather than capital, we have to hire a contractor.
Moving on to sewer expense, very similar, but labor component is 56%. We don't have a lot of mechanical systems in our sewer system because we don't have a wastewater treatment plant, so that keeps price down there. I haven't had a chance to pull out the utilities component yet for the pricing. The pumps were the Robertson and Sunnydale lift stations were handed over to us 3 to 5 years ago. And although I apologize for not having that utility component pulled out yet, we were waiting a couple of years to see what they were actually costing, to see if we were going to need individual accounts or joint accounts. Anyway, that's just some background stuff. But moving forward in future years, we will have the utility component pulled out of there. All we have is electricity for that. There's no heat, there's no gas component. And then I just wanted to show a bit of some of the water and capital historical funding, just kind of in preparation for CEO McClure's talk about how we're gonna look at funding this stuff moving forward, so. And then in the end, it all ends up at the wastewater treatment plant, so it all ends up at the CPCC. So that's the conclusion of my little presentation, but time for any questions, if anybody has any more before we move on.
That was awesome.
That was very good. Thank you, Director.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed the tour.
That's awesome.
Okay, so as far as my next step here, going to speak about some of the utility items. It may be a bit of a, might be a bit of sticker shock right off the bat, but this is just some of the things I'm looking at. And then we'll go in a bit more in depth on water and sewer, just some capital projects. Garbage is or environmental health services, as the way they call it, is a little bit of a different animal. We basically contract out. And so basically how that works is a big driver on what's happening with our fees. So anyway. Yeah. See the image. Okay. So this is sort of the utility rates discussion. When we get into 2023, when we go around 2024, we'll be doing this more in October, and we'll have more time to discuss things and go over it. There is a bit of some time pressure that's involved with this because we tend to want to have the bill out because we've got a date on what's happening with getting the discount. So we want to get the bill out in time to give people an ample amount of that ability to get in and pay that on time to get the break that we get. So again, this is just for discussion. And again, looking for some direction because when we come to January 9th, I do want to come with a rate. Now, again, I propose these. This does not mean this is what it should be or not. This is a proposal that I have. Council may say directly, and I would hope that at the end of today that you're sort of saying, I'm comfortable with this, I'm not comfortable with that. Please, adjust this or whatnot. And then my hope would be is that we will come back in January, do a bit more of a report out to council on what it is, and again, be able to have the rate set for 2023. We have three different kind of utility rates here. We've got obviously the water, we've got the sewer and resource recovery, or again to environmental services, which is your garbage pickup, and also some work that public works staff does in regards to summer and spring cleanups. If you look at what's happening here, and like I said, this is just that high level piece. I don't want you to be too shocked, but as we looked at the rates, even the breakdown of what the operating cost of 1.7 million versus $700,000. That's why you're going to see the difference between what your water rate is and what your sewer rate is. The other portion that you have to remember is on the sewer side, someone is also getting a bill, or when they get their bill from City of Trail on top of it, it has whatever taxes we've collected for the actual municipality, but then a regional district and all the services that will be in there. So that's where the other side of the equation of the wastewater treatment plant expenditure costs would be on that requisition coming from regional district or Kootenai boundary onto the taxes. So they kind of figure out, as our director Martin is there, he's part of those budget conversations. He'll bring those information back to us. They set those rates, what they need for all the different services that trail residents and commercial properties are involved with. In the regional services that we have, and then that will come back and they will say, hey, you need to collect this amount of money from the residents and commercial and major industry from through a tax requisition that'll go on that bill. But just to let you know, when you look at that, Sewer rate, sometimes it can be a little bit different, because as we go through this, I do have a chart at the end from the slide I used last year with Samo, kind of shows you where things are at, but sometimes it can be a little bit misleading, because all those other places have their own sort of treatment plan as part of their sewer collection, whereas Trail is part of Roslyn and Warfield, where you're just kind of paying for the collection component. The treatment part is being funded through regional districts. So sometimes it can be misleading as far as looking where the charts are. Water rates, I am looking at a 10% increase, and again, a 5% for sewer. We are seeing obviously some pretty significant increases just overall. I think a 300% increase in the cost of polyurethane pipe. So even if you want to change out pipes for what's happening on water and sewer treatment, water and sewer pipes, that cost has jumped again, concrete, labor, just even contracting. Right now, the city is got one more year on their collective agreement. So they've had 2% and they get 2% into 2023. But we know what's happening in the province with other unionized workforces, and the fact that those that are settling during this time of high inflation are seeing some higher increases, and that's a low going forward. We're going to have some requests coming through. I'm going to move into garbage next, and like I said, we'll do a bit more detail on water and sewage. So for environmental health services, I was just looking at where we look to be coming in at. We're not quite finished December. There's always a bit of timing delay on costs, but the bills usually go out. As you can see, we're pretty much in line. And again, a little bit the fact that some people did not pay or have not paid or do not pay on time to get the discounts. So you can see what we budget for discounts a little bit different. So that can benefit the city. On the collection side, you can see that we have a contract. So they basically send us an invoice every month. And so that's what that set is. There can be a few things that are off on that, but not usually very much. The tipping fees. One thing is a good news story. We were noting that we seem to be down 6% on tipping fees, which don't necessarily have an explanation for why that would be. I do know that some of the increased recycling options can be helpful, and as the community gets better at doing that. Again, we've got spring cleanup and fall cleanup, and I think that that's one of those beneficial things for our community, but that is done by our own public works staff. So that's again kind of one of those separate items. So again, we're looking a bit better and the forecast, but I do reiterate it is a forecast. We haven't finished December 31st for the year end, so these numbers will change. How much exactly, I'm not sure, but that's just something I want you to be aware of what we're looking at. So we're in line of things. We're a bit ahead of on what the variances is. Like I said, a big part, well, 25% of that is just even almost the fact that there's less discounts taken than there were last year. So if I go at too fast. If I look at what 2023 to 2022 budget comparison, are seeing a bit of an increase as it relates to the fee request. So again, that is that going from 143 to 148. So that's about a $5 increase. And that's at the highest rate. Again, you get a discount from that. So when I talk about some of these numbers, they're before the discount. So remember that we provide about a 7% discount on the fees if you pay it by a certain date. One particular you'll notice on the expense side where we're getting pressure is on the collection. We in tabulating and going through as the GFL, who is the proponent right now and is dealing with the collection, noting that we had a number of homes that weren't on the list. So again, if we reconcile that on how many places they're picking out from and what we owe them on that, we are seeing that going into 2023 that there's a lift needed on what their contract would say as per home. Again, as I noted before, the good news story is that we were seeing tipping fees being lower than what we had budgeted. So I've kind of lowered that budget. I've kind of kept the spring and fall cleanup the same. And you can see that we're basically on this budget, pretty close and to where we're basically balanced. The other thing that was interesting is that I did find out from the regional district, Cooney Boundary today, that they are not increasing tipping fees. The tipping fees had gone up a number of years here. They've gone from under 100 to 110 down to 120, but those are staying based on the manager over there saying that they're staying at 120 for 2023. So again, so this is just looking at these numbers. Not much of a change, but that would be a reflection of a $5 in the gross amount for year resource recovery for 2023. And again, too, I thought this was important because as I look through the numbers and what I'm seeing on our infrastructure deficit, one of the things that you can see is that there hasn't been a lot of increases over the last 6 years, 7 years. Again, you did have a bit of a lift in 2017. You can see it went up 7%, but since then, you're probably averaging around 1.25%. So even if you've got wages going up at 2% plus inflation, etc., that's one of the factors that can happen. I mean, it's good for the. I guess you could say it would appear good to the user, except that if you're not getting the money into the reserve, which then allows us to go and invest in the capital infrastructure we need to do, then you're going to end up with catch up, and that's sort of what I'm seeing as we go forward. And same thing for the sewer rates, even kind of lower percentage there. You're probably at a average of 1% that it's increased over the past 7 years. Again, to garbage, not huge increases, but again, that is a little bit more what's happening with the contractor and what that rate comes for being able to have that collection, because we don't do it in-house. One thing I will also say on garbage, that there is a hope as that there may be some work that goes on as the regional district goes into organics curbside collection. So again, in doing that type of work, you would hope that we would partner. Is there a way to do that? I know that they're kind of in a process of trying to figure out what does it look like, who's going to take that contract on. But I just know that for our residences, and just being cognizant of things, you don't want to see a truck every 2 weeks doing recycling, and then the same week you've got a truck going by and picking up your garbage, and then another truck coming by and picking up your organics. So I really hope, I'm really optimistic that we can work with the team over at RDKB, and we can find a way where there can be synergies for the entire area. And I know that the good people over there will work with us. I believe it. It's still new. We have our current contract with GFL goes in until a few months into 2024. So timing of things, we will discuss that, and we will work with what happens on that end. And again, you guys are pretty quiet, so it's the stunned part of like, what the hell is he talking about, or what numbers are he looking at? But please, hope you'll ask any questions, but we'll get into a little more detail on water sewer. But I will show you this particular graph, and again, this is one that I had built for 2020. One for Samo, or for 2022 as we were doing it, and just kind of giving you a sense on rates. And again, you might say, well, hey, what's going on? But you can sort of see even on the blue bands, which have to do with water, as compared to your wastewater, which is orange. And you can see where trail is substantially lower on the orange than the others, but that's because they're part of that, again, group that deals with the sharing. Now, again, you do see Roslyn is higher than us. I don't know all that comes with what they're dealing with themselves, but I noticed that they're there, and Warfield is also significantly higher than what our rate is. But anyway, just wanted to kind of point that out. And again, one thing that needs to also be clear on this is that this is a case of the residential. So again, we also have some metered rates that are going on. Likelihood is that they probably don't. I think if they've got your downtown, you don't have a major industry in a place like Ross, even in Warfield, right? They're likely, this is just a rate that is being, hey, what's happening here? Whereas we also would have a combination that would be different than some of the other communities of, here's my residential component, but we also have a commercial and heavy industry component of what's going on here. Now, again, we don't deal with water with our heavy industry because they've got their own. But again, sometimes when you look at these, you don't always know the nuances of who's including what and what's going on with that. But I just kind of was noting that we are in the lower band. Yes, Councilor.
So then from Director McIsaac's talk, this is based off of the wastewater is based off of the waste is based off the flow meters that the one at Warfield would calculate the Rawson one, and then if there was meter ones in Rosslyn, it would subtract that from there to determine
Yeah,
residential or?
it's a great question. I don't know kind of
Okay.
what Roslyn does and how the billing kind of
Okay.
goes out on that side and again, on ours here, we're kind of saying like, look, we're responsible for 80 kilometers and some lift stations. We're gonna need to collect some money to be able to deal with that. And a lot of times when you think about it, even though there is commercial property, and we do get some flow coming from our major industry, most of this is gonna be residential.
Yeah.
Especially when you think about how many kilometers that is, it's because it's getting to all of these homes that need to have their water brought to them and then their
Right.
their waste taken away. So, and again, this is sort of that window of residential, but I was just noting, I don't know what effect on Moorfield and say Roslyn, who we are partnering with. You'll notice they are on the lower end
Yeah.
of on the sewer side, because again, that component you're talking about on treatment is gonna be flowing through the regional district.
Yeah.
So,
Interesting.
so
We're very equal to what Castlegar is.
yes, now again, you've got to be careful with Castlegar because they also habits change a lot of times too when you're dealing with meters. So theirs is also kind of checking out a rate. So now I think that you would find that even for some of what was happening on that on the component of water, if you're pumping up and treating and then getting it out to your community, and that's based on your metered rate, you may not be washing your driveway, you may not be doing.
So is Castlegar meter?
Yes,
Oh,
right,
okay.
and so I apologize, that's what I was trying to say, so on their side, each home has got a meter to it, so there's a factors is based amount plus usage. And so that's. what's
And that
going-
doesn't take into account the amount they're paying on top for their usage. This is what they're billing out.
No, this would be, I think this is based on this, and sometimes it's hard because we get the numbers from Civic Web, who kind of collects this information. But that's the data that we get is on their collection and treatment, that's what an average home is. Right? So, and again, I think it goes back to what we were talking about before. If you've got the average home is using X in your community, you could be above or below, so your rates could be higher or lower based on that. Most of them are gonna always have a flat fee because they need to kind of have it for capital.
Mhm.
Anyway, I just thought it was important to kind of have this, and I will make sure that you've got a hard copy of this or an email copy of this as well. Okay, so those are just my quick little slideshows, high-low component, and then I was gonna jump into the spreadsheets we have there. Okay, so if you got the 8.5 by 11s and it should be sorted there, and I'm not sure, Councilor Butler, if you've got the one pages there, but there's also a kind of a capital component. You did it?
No,
No, you didn't.
it's only just at the.
Well, they get these prices if you wanted this.
That's the big one.
Those two, the small, yeah, 8.5 for water. Yes, if you can just give those to Councilor Butler. Thank you. So, if you look in the top right-hand corner of the big 8.5 by 11 sheet, and it's got an A in front of it. Okay, that is going to be our wastewater utility. And so, the other, if you look also, there will be an 8.5 11 page that will say 5-year capital sewer fund. Okay, so, and when we look at this, it's a little bit of a busy spreadsheet, but there's a method to the madness here. So, number one, if you look on the left-hand column, which is A, and you go down to row 42, you'll see another A. Okay, so if you're reading this spreadsheet, you're looking at revenues from your fees, metered revenue, other connection revenues. We don't seem to have a lot of connection revenue, so I didn't have anything in there per se, but that's something that can happen if we have a large development that connections or even smaller connections connecting to our system. And then you look at B, which is on row 46, and you see it's your operating expenses. Now, the idea being here is that whatever we collect under A for revenue, and then whatever's happening with B, which is your operating expenses, plus we have some debt that we're getting close to paying off on the sewer utility, so that would be on row 48, column K, if I'm looking under the budget right now. And you can see that the amount of revenue that we collect after we pay all of our operating costs and our debt right now, only about 10% is remaining to fund capital, which is $117,000. Now, on this particular spreadsheet, you'll note that I'm looking at a 5% increase for sewer rates for 2023 all the way to 2027. Each year, that's going to range about a $13, $14 a year annually increase over those years. And you will note that the reserve, once we pay off some debt, you start to see where the increases a bit as we get out into years 2026 and 7 and 8, where the percentage of what's available for capital increases. Now, once you go, which is kind of that row 50, A minus B equals C, which is your net revenue, then you need to go up to row 15. And row 15 is what we actually had in reserve currently. So when I take what we've got at the end of the 2021 financial statements, and I take our capital reserve plus our operating reserve, this is where we've got about $3.3 million sitting in a sewer fund right now, which is a good news story, right? However, you can see as you go out on some of these years, and if we are looking at the contribution, so that's row 17 under column I for the projected actual, which is in blue. You can see that we're adding about $192,000 after operating expenses to the reserve in 2022, but we've also had a capital expenditure of about $250,000. So you can see that we're actually going to drop a bit in the reserve balance this year. So again, if you go over now to column K, which is the budget for 2023, you'll see that our opening reserve balance is about $3.35 million. We're expecting about $117,000 to come in from revenues after expenses, and this is with a 5% increase in the but we're expecting to spend about $1.388 million in capital this year. So once you do that, you can see that, again, mathematically going to column L in 2024, you can see the reserve balance is now dropped from $3.35 million to $2.164 million. And again, if you look at column row 17, I should say, in there, so we've got $142,000. So you can see that we're slowly sort of chipping away here at what we have in reserve, because we're trying to tackle some of the capital that we need to undertake. The one thing that I think would be important, and that might be something plausible for us to look at in the next couple of years, because I'm just right now looking at, we set the rate for 2023, and then when we get into 2024, and when we get into the fall of 2023 here, looking at 2024, we'll have a more fulsome discussion. A commitment from staff is that we will, have a better understanding of what capital needs to be when and where, and some costing. The one thing that I do put in my spreadsheet under row 36 is inflation. So as much as we've kind of got these numbers of it's going to cost us $500,000 today, we need to put $500,000 towards doing either zipper lining or doing other capital work for the sewer utility. Having to incorporate that inflation as it builds over time, you can see that we want to make sure that we're not that we're giving you numbers that recognize that the cost is going up over time. So as I kind of discussed that, and as you sort of digested, hopefully I didn't lose you as far as kind of what's going on, but you can see, even as we are doing better in sewer, you can see that it's by 2031 we actually have gone into a deficit. So again, we wouldn't go into a deficit. This is just more of getting council aware of the work that we need to do on infrastructure and how much it costs and the funding. We will be able to work on, move with, change numbers. Again, the fact that in 2025, which is not that far away, your debt will be paid off. That's again, another business decision that we may make, that you say, like, look, we know that we need to, borrow because this is a long lasting asset. So sometimes people say, well, it's unfair that you, put that burden on the current taxpayer. So maybe you have a slower increase, but yet you borrow money to be able to do more work and then, have that pay off over 20 years or 30 years. So again, that will be something in the future of some future discussions that we will have. But the sewer utility itself is not in bad shape as far as what we would hope that we would want to be able to do to tackle some of the projects. Again, not owning the sewage treatment plant is a big factor in why you're only dealing with this. But again, when you've got 80 kilometers worth of sewer pipe throughout your community, a lot of it older, these are some of the things that we're going to have to look at as a council. So, and while you're digesting that, I just wanted to kind of give you a sense of where these things are kind of coming from. And so there's a 8.5 by 11 sheet there that should say sewer fund. And add a bit of one of the things that I should have talked about is when we talk about trenchless sewer rehabilitation, which again is also known as SIPR lining. And when they say SIPR lining, it means cure in place. There's a lot of acronyms that go on, but cure in place. And this is a great technology because it means that you don't have to rip up. You've got, you may have some, a lot of places have clay pipe. The hole's sort of there, sort of been held there, but there's really no pipe left. But what they can do basically is it's like a balloon, so they can go from one manhole to another manhole, and over a stretch of say 100 meters or 400 meters or whatever it is, if there's no kind of real breaks in the line that need to be fixed, they basically have a system where it's like fiberglass, and it's like a balloon, and they can take it from one end to the other, and then once they've got the tubes, they almost like blow it up like a balloon. So it kind of basically puts about I would say half an inch of fiberglass piping through, kind of holds that whole pipe. And of course, it's really good in a number of different reasons. One is because you haven't had to dig up in homes and people's properties, and especially in some of our tight areas here. Usually it has to be make sure that you root cut it because it's been infiltrated, as the director was talking about before. We need to get all the roots out of there. But that's one of the things that helps with flow and improvement, is the fact that you now don't have the trees kind of getting into it, which can help us with our not bubbling up or having overflows, as Director McIsaac was talking about earlier today. So that's a really valuable product and a valuable service that is being provided. And again, because one of the major costs these days is paving. So anytime that you have to pull things up and replace paving on top of it, that's the real killer for most of the community. And that's why a lot of times you'll also see items in here called synergy projects, because the last thing you want to do is, if you've got a road that needs to be paved, nothing worse than paving a road and then 2 years later coming along and putting a big side cut through it, or a cut right down the side of it, and replace the piping. And so this is the work that right now we're working on, that asset management component. So 2023 is a big year of kind of getting that information and flowing it, because we want to be able to find out where's the street that needs to be paved, but also has pipe, sewer, and water that we need to be able to get in there and do it all at once. And so that's kind of what we classify as synergy projects. So a couple of things that are itemized there. There's a few smaller items, but most of this, and again, too, you'll notice in 2023, we've got that Groudage Missing Link project budgeted there. And then we've got at the bottom, sort of that sewer main, immediate replacements, medium, and then the long term. And I've sort of just had a number there that I'm putting in under that main replacements. We know that the immediate, trying to do that in a 4-year window, but then also having kind of $500,000 a year going out for probably forever. This is sort of the idea that you're going to want to be able to do. One of the things that we also need to take a good look at and get some mapping on, which we're not quite there for, is to know what have we updated. So if we've got 80 kilometers, we know that we've done a bunch of work too. So giving council the understanding of, it's not like nothing has been done, but it would be good to know what has been done, so that you can also see your progress over the next 4 years to say, okay, hey, we came in here, we started to get this work done, and now we can see that we're getting a number of these kilometers either relined or fixed. One of the challenges too that can come in, and you'll notice in my spreadsheet, is that it's got 500,000 for a couple of years of main replacement, and then $500,000 in SIP lining. And one of the reasons for that is that you will find that there's a section and they want to be able to do it, but there's a break halfway down and the pipe is missing each other. So they can't make the system go through that. So then we would have to point repair that. You had to go in, find that spot, go down, dig it, fix that, and then they can kind of take care of the remaining areas. So that's some work that always has to be done. So it's not the cure in place is excellent, but there also sometimes can be the need for repairs so they can do the work that they want to do. So you're all very quiet, which is a bit concerning, and I know it's a bit much to kind of digest. But again, looking at these numbers and at a 5% increase, that would be about $13. That would be the increase to a residential home for a sewer increase of that amount.
I guess the question that I have is, do any of our mains, are they all substantial for volume? Or do any of our, like, is what we have sufficient right now? Like, do we need any of those as we're doing these replacements? Are we making them bigger? Are we keeping them the same?
Sanitary sewer mostly stays the same. It's stormwater pipes that are being upsized to mitigate environmental issues. Yeah.
Okay, I know, like I said, this is a new style, a new kind of presentation for people, but right now we might move on to water. There's no questions on this, and then once we look at water, which is a bit more sobering, then we can come back and talk about what you think, what you see. And again, I respect that you're the individuals that need to put your hand up and say, hey, I'm willing to move forward on this, but you're also the individuals that are going to get the calls of, you know, what's going on down at City Hall kind of thing. So,
What's the CCTV inspection?
That's the closed circuit video when they put the camera through the sewer line to check the condition of the pipe. So that's a precursor to doing a line work.
Right. And then the Vector truck sewer camera, is there not one on there right now, or is it needing replacement?
It doesn't have one. It's be an add-on tool.
And so you know what you're pumping out of there, what you're sucking, you can see it before you hit it, basically.
Yeah, well, it'd be multi-purpose.
Okay.
Yeah, so you could see it for a blockage, or you could use it for doing some inspection work as well.
any other questions on the sewer sheet? No? Okay. Okay, so water. This one is kind of scary. When we looked at it, we kind of mapped out what's going to be needed. And again, remembering this is looking out 15 years. So again, just wanting to kind of put it in front of you. There's a this is not an end all be all. We've got work to do here, but I also wanted to kind of map out as best as we could sort of what are the things that are imminent, some of the things that we've actually put things towards grant funding requests, and just an ongoing water line replacement. And council might say that's too much money and we need to roll that back, and that's all very good. But I wanted council to be aware of kind of where the capital numbers are at. Again, if you look at what's happening here, row 53 is your revenue. So we have not only revenues that are from the fees, but we also have a parcel tax that is attached on water. So that's one of the things too. So if you look at that connection on what's happening there, we do have obviously some metered revenue. And again, we're doing better here in the sense that if you take A, row 53 to 55 revenues minus B, or operational expenses and debt servicing, you can see that we're looking at about 371,000 or 15% of what we're collecting for rates. Now, again, that's at a 10% increase for 2023. You can see that that is again producing about $371,000 worth of contributions. But in the same vein, if you look across what's needing to happen capital wise, you can see that the needs are much greater in water than they are in sewer. And in fact, on this particular budget sheet, and this is just me plumping in some numbers, trying, because I also understand that it's a lift for people, but that at 10%, that's about $37-40 as an increase, or $41 increase over a year. And I was looking at 10% increase for 5 years, which would be 50% after 5 years, and then dropping that down to 5%. Now, a number of things that I think are important here is that the city gets about $400,000 from the Community Works Fund. And it's a fund that is be used for capital. It has a number of different uses for it. This, I think, would be an area where you would probably want to direct it to take those funds. It's going to help with taking some of the pressure off. But again, even in 2023, we've got a pretty modest work to be done, $1.4 million. One of those big ones too would be something that we would, would we move forward on, because it also relates to the Gravage Avenue work in this particular one here. So if we don't get the grant, does that not happen? But still, we have ongoing costs going forward. But you can see that the opening reserve balance as of for the end of 2021 is again almost $3 million. We are putting in about 370,000 from what we're projecting on our revenues over our expenses and our debt payments for 2022, which is coming in under row 19, column I. And our capital expenditures, what we can see right now is not a huge amount, but it is something that helps us this year. But anything we don't get done this year is just going to get carried forward into 2023 and onwards. But you'll see in 2023 that the reserve drops down to about almost $2 million at the end of 2023 if we get the work that we want to get done in 2023. One of the ones that I will note is under row 33 is $150,000 for a plan update. So I think part of it I think is important is going out to see, we've mapped this out, but is it palatable for the community? You can see it's staggering kind of where the numbers are at for how much we need to do capital-wise. But I think it would be valuable to have someone look at our system and provide the feedback. We are also working on that, but it's just update to what we already have for the plan. So we've already got plans, and so these are items that are not just pulled out of the air. These are items that the director has had or has been on a master plan or a planning document that he's been using, and so that's where these come from. So, and again, kind of remembering that you got 5-year chunks sort of thing. So, but very quickly you can see that we kind of go into the deficit. Same as the sewer utility, we don't have a big debt payment, but it's also going to get paid off in 2028. So again, not as early as what's happening in the sewer utility, but again, this might be a place that we need to borrow some money and sort of defer that cost of doing this work so that people pay for it over 20 or 30 years. So that's why I've got a question mark there under row 23, column M, sort of where we look to be heading into looking to borrow, especially for the Bear Creek well. There's also the Glen Mary Reservoir review and replacement. And so again, and I might just at this stage just get me to pick up the 8.5 by 11 sheet that kind of talks about the water fund capital projects, and the recognition here is that, you know, we've got the wastewater treatment plant. It was built in 94, am I correct on that?
Yes.
And so we have the certain treatment, how that works is good, but we know that today's technology talks about membranes. We don't have anything in here for, you know, upgrading that particular system, but we do have, which is common and not hugely expensive right off the bat, but just whether they're pump upgrades, some rebuilds, those ongoing kind of work that needs to be done at the plant ongoing. But you start to, again, get a sense on some of the bigger ones. So like the Charles Lake Drive water line replacement. And am I correct, Director Kaiser, that's coming from Sunnydale towards the downtown?
Yeah, that's the main feed coming out of Sunnydale on Charles Lake Drive.
And Bear Creek well replacement, again, we talked about how valuable that is to the city. And that is one that we believe that we can get some grant funding for, or we have kind of a, one would say shovel ready project, so that when something comes forward, so you'll notice when that one pops up in column N, row 21, you can see that we've got $2.24 million in there, because I will be expecting 70 cent dollars on getting an upgrade on that particular work. The piece about kind of trying to plan these out and where they fit, you know, is things can move around, but you can see that there's going to work that needs to be done. And we would never want to see or be in a situation where we're in a panic to have to replace the Bear Creek well. So twinning it is something, as Director Kaiser talked about, that would be that particular project. And the fact that it runs almost continually, again, which is another reason where needs to be a dual sort of work here. Not only do I think we need to look at the infrastructure, but we also need to work in our community on demand management and trying to, you know, and that also comes from the city itself on the amount of irrigation and work that we do, and like to have a green, but is there different ways that might be more water conservation and help us with the demand on our water and how we act as a city itself. Yeah, and if I again get you to look at that particular document there, you can see that the Charles line that it's needs to be upgraded. I can see the Bear Creek well, it's out a couple of years. Some fire hydrant replacements, normal. Couple of other bins booster to upper lookout tank water line. Well, you kind of saw where that was sitting and how from the Coleman reservoir, it comes down into bins and then has to get all the way back up to the top there, so that we can have that lookout be able to feed all of West Trail for the water pressure that they need. And you can see the price tag on that one's $20 million. So and then going down a bit further, some of those big asks as well. You've got the Glen Mary tank replacement at $5 million. And we talked about that earlier today in the presentation, where it's undersized and is basically getting drained 12 times a day in the heat, you know, in the middle of the summer sort of thing. We know there's a lot of demand coming out of that particular reservoir. Again, as the same as the sewer component, you've got the water component for the Groudage Avenue missing link project, which we talked about earlier today. We hope that we get some support from CBT. And not even in this particular spreadsheet is sort of these synergy projects, whether it's the Glen Mary water main, East Trail water main, West Trail. Again, another staggering numbers there, but another $7 million that isn't even in the spreadsheet as far as capital costs. And again, I don't come here today expecting everyone to have celebration, but I do know that sometimes these are tough decisions that council will need to make, and that will it will be necessary, and so in one way you kind of look at it, you're gonna pay one way or another in a sense, and so one of it, I didn't want to hide kind of what is I want council to be aware what's happening in that cabinet, so I think doesn't mean that we don't have to take a year and study it better and come back with some better answers or plan for council. We can absolutely do that. But I just wanted to get in front of council on some infrastructure, especially on the water sewer. You're in a better place. And that might be a plan too. I talked about with Director McIsaac is where you might have, and I've seen it done it in other places where maybe we're not doing as much work we lower kind of the work that happens in the sewer utility. And then you kind of switch the rates. So maybe you take $100 out of or whatever amount that we're kind of collecting as far as the sewer fund is concerned, and maybe put that into water for a while to kind of help build that up over time, try to get us into a healthier spot, or trying to stick handle. I mean, it means yes, water goes up, but sewer goes down, so the homeowner is kind of getting the net effect of that change, and yet you're getting some more dollars going into where there's more capital intensive projects.
Mhm.
So, anyway, I'm a bit nervous because
We're quiet.
Well, you're very quiet for me. Usually a group that's got lots of questions, and I know that there's a lot to digest here. But
Can I ask why there was not a ton spent in capital projects this year? Comparatively, like, I mean, it looks like we were like double.
This year?
Well, just this year to last year, so there's
There's,
annual capital expenditures of 715,000.
well, there's a lot of carry forward because work just didn't get completed.
Okay,
So we're still coming out of that COVID time where it was complicated to move projects forward. So we have a lot of delays that are dragging money forward, so.
and we are seeing contractors being busy too,
Mhm.
right? So, and that can also have a negative effect on, well, if we're gonna bid for this, here's my price or everything, and that's not something that we want to just do, but we also understand that there's some work that needs to be done in the city, and again, part of it is that you know by trying to have a planned approach with it that we will get better at and understand what needs to be done. But,
So I just have a question
Sure,
on
please.
the water main replacement for 854,000.
Mhm.
So where would that? Is that just general, the main line, or is it all over
yeah, so again, Mayor Jones,
or
if you,
specific?
yeah, so if you look at, and I maybe should have done a better job there, but if you look at the 8.5 by 11 sheet,
Mhm.
you'll see Groutage Avenue is 490 for the water main replacement. And then you'll also see that under Daniel Street, there's another water.
Okay, so
replacement. So,
that's combined.
yes, those are some of
Okay.
those combined numbers that will be in there. And there's another one there, the 150,000 for 1,200 block of Dewey.
Mhm.
So if you take those numbers, that's where kind of that water line.
Oh,
is
okay.
kind of where it is.
Okay, that makes,
Should
I was- yeah.
have gathered those maybe together better, so thank you for that. And I can do that so that they match with what's on the sheet.
Sorry.
Yes.
The community works grant. Can
Yes.
you explain that again? And
Yeah. Yeah, so the,
no,
yeah, no, it's a great question. So, UBCM, negotiated or has negotiated with the gas tax. So a lot of times you kind of hear about a gas tax, they kind of change the words around because they don't like to use gas tax. I think community, Build Canada Better kind of fund or
Right,
whatever it
okay.
is. And so they do two things. One is that they sort of have an ongoing capital amount that they give to all municipalities. There's a spreadsheet that they have on their website. It shows what each community kind of gets, and you can see that it's sort of committed for. So that if I'm getting $400,000 a year, and that it has parameters on, it, so you can't like buy a fire truck with it. right? But you can use it for things like water upgrades or at your park. It has a pretty broad thing. But it was the way of saying, look, if you're collecting all this gas tax money, this is where it came from. We want to see that kind of flow back to the municipalities to help them out with infrastructure. And so a number of years ago, there was a change because at first they really wanted to lock it down to cleaner air, cleaner water. So you would have seen it only been able to use on upgrading your sewage treatment plant or upgrading a water line or doing different things like that. But they did open it up. So now you can like use it for a walking path, or you can use it. There's a whole list of projects that they now make it available, and they made it less restrictive. And that was one of the reasons that if you do recall that I moved the community works fund out of sitting in deferred revenue, and it's now in its own reserve because it has less restrictions. The money that we have currently in the reserve, the 1.4 million, has been committed by the previous council to do the lights at Butler Park. So that's where that funding is kind of earmarked, and that's why you kind of, if you're looking like, well, why don't you have it? It's like I'm just suggesting to you, and again, this is just me saying this is how much money we get, and it will inflationary. We'll get a few lifts, so like in a few years, it might go up to $415,000, and sometimes they have double payments and things like that. So anyway, those are some of the that is one that I figure if the grant was meant for helping out with things like water systems and sanitary systems. So I think that, you know, again, what it does mean is if Director Davison wants something for the Memorial Center, he might be saying, I'm sorry, all the money's kind of been directed into this project, right? But that's just a funding source. I plunked it there. That is not, I realize that's council's decision on whether they want to or not, but I was trying to find a way to
No, that makes sense.
help out with what I see as a whole.
Take down the sticker shock.
Yes, well, exactly, Councilor Hanson.
So, I mean, I suppose the question to ask is where is our greatest need,
Yes.
immediate greatest need of that list?
Well, I guess the easy answer is a synergy project. So if you're going to advance projects where you're going to either be near or exposing the water system in that area, for example, the Daniel Street retaining wall replacement. So we have to cut back the road in such a way to build the new retaining wall that we're going to impact the water and sewer infrastructure. So you're going to want to replace that while you're there, instead of impacting it and then going back a number of years later and then potentially cutting into the geogrid, which holds back the wall or whatever holdback system they use, you know, at a later date to repair, say, a water or sewer line that may fail. So you'd want to do that. The Grotage Avenue works would be another priority. As we read more into that project, the infrastructure in that area is upwards of 80 years old. So it's fairly old and it's significant infrastructure for us. So that's a high priority because it's going to be linked to the Missing Link project. And the third one was another synergy project. So we have to do some work on the retaining wall to the city's Fortis Parkade. So it's a Fortis Parkade is the name of it, but a component of that is owned by the city. And the wall, which abuts the Dewdney Avenue, we need to stop water penetrating that wall, or we're going to have some significant damage to that parkade. Part of that is to dig up that Dewdney Avenue, and when we do, we're going to impact the water sewer infrastructure there. So we're going to want to replace that at the same time. So those three projects are the highest priority that we're looking at right now. If you're looking at criticality of infrastructure, they're not the most critical items of infrastructure. The Charles Lakes Drive water main replacement or twinning looks like replacement due to constraints with room to actually put that thing in the ground. You know, that would be a higher priority based on criticality, but the pipe is nearing its end of service life, but it's not like failing immediately. So it's not as important to get that work done in 2023, say, as the other three projects that we're looking to advance with more critical projects as far as immediate need. If I'm not talking in circles there, I hope I'm not, so.
No,
that's actually making
that's
sense,
absolutely,
so.
no, that makes great sense. And then the reservoir, the Glen Mary tank replacement, I mean, that's pretty substantial. But I mean, from what you're saying is that doesn't have enough capacity, which means you're working the pumps harder, you're working everything harder because it's got to fill more, which means you're aging out other infrastructure because of that, correct?
That's correct, yeah, there's a whole big component to that, so. Once we move forward with our water system planning and hopefully the development of a water system master plan. And the build out of our asset management plan will be taking all those factors into account and then. Not to get too far off topic, I don't know if we want to get into an asset management plan discussion, but with asset management planning comes the service level requirements. So then we come back to council and say, what's the service level that you would like as far as water system delivery? And, and then we look at the criticality of the infrastructure, the cost savings throughout the life cycle of the item as it's impacting other infrastructure, like you just mentioned. We have issues with high water pressures throughout the city. So I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but every 10 psi greater than say 70 psi on a water main decreases the life expectancy of the pipe. And we have a lot of pressure zones in the city where we are 90 and above. So we have some pressure zones where we're up to like 110 plus psi. So putting a lot of pressure on those aging pipes. So we're also accelerating the decrease in life of that infrastructure there. So there are other issues that we can look at down the road, which could help mitigate stuff like you're mentioning, where we can replace a reservoir and look at saving some life on the Bear Creek well. And we'll have to figure out how that actually fits in the big picture, because we have a lot of aging infrastructure. We have very few components which are new, and a lot of our infrastructure is, it was put together. It was installed with old installation practices as well, which doesn't help the life of the pipe. So when we're talking specifically with water system, we have water mains that are 80 years old. We have a lot of water mains which are undersized. So we're not only looking at pipes that are aging out and need to be replaced, but we're looking at service enhancements where the pipes are 4-inch and they have fire hydrants on them. And the industry's norm now is a 6-inch water main as opposed to 4-inch. So we have, just off the top of my head, we have 5,000 meters of those enhancements to be done as well. So like CAO McClure was saying, there's a lot of balancing there. Like there's a lot of juggling, and this is my best outlook as what we're going to need right now. But of course, as we go into some greater planning, we can nail that down even better and help the 25-year forecast. So, but as for 23, those 3 projects that are listed would be our highest priority right now, along with some continuing work at the water treatment plant with valve replacements and such up there. So, that's not listed on there yet. So, or is it on there?
Is it number 2? Item.
Sorry. Okay. Yes, yeah. So there's some water plant work on there too. So. Yeah, but for water mains, those would be our 3 biggest priorities this year.
Well, I really like the idea. I like the layout of this. You're showing us 5 years ahead, because that really enables us to think ahead, like we're being a proactive rather than reactive. And quite often when you're reactive, it costs us more money, right? I mean, if you look at what happened to Green Avenue, for example, the flooding up there and the road washing away and the wall, and that's definitely not something that we planned for. So I think that, by looking at these projects and being able to think ahead a little bit, it gives us a better idea of where the money's going for sure. I will say that I'm a little bit uneasy about the 10%. It's a little bit scary to throw those numbers out there right now without, I don't know, having a little bit more conversation about all of this. I don't know how everyone else is feeling. Not that we have to make a decision right now, but it's good to get that subject on the
Yes,
table for sure.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And like, again, sometimes, when the accountant side of me goes, for all the increases for 2020. Three, you're looking at less than $5, right? In a month, $5 a month sort of thing, as far as what that costs the homeowner sort of thing. And I know that it comes in one bill, but it just saying to you that it's less than $5. And you think about, you're getting as much water as you want to use, you're having it taken away and coming and getting your garbage and that sort of thing. So, and again, when I showed some of those slides there earlier on, there hasn't been much increases at all over the last 6 years for sure. So even if you had something a bit, like, again, some of those prices weren't not even covering the cost of wage increases, right? So it's and again, I know that there can be pressure, and I know the pressure that that council feels, because you're an elected official and you go to have to have people, but I also know that I don't come here with information that I think that you need to be aware of, right? So and that's what staff's role, I think, is always to kind of come and say is that this is what I see. I think this is what you need to do. Even if it was at 2% higher over those last 3 or 4 years, you're right at that 10%, no problem, right? So yeah, it's a big lift in the current year, and I know that I've got it out happening for 10%, but you'll have more information in 2020, in the fall of 2023 of what 2024 looks like, and whether or not, hey, let's borrow, or what, this can be pushed off a number of years, and the goal to have some more planning documents for council to be able to go over and be communicated on.
So, if I could, Director McIsaac, when you mentioned before that some of these items have been brought forward from the previous years because of COVID and not being able to get the work done, do you have any idea of what that amount would be? I know that's kind of a hard question to answer right away, but because bringing that money forward would put us at a little bit more of an increase, right? And then when we got to 2024, we would see that drop off, which we do. Is that because of the projects that we're bringing forward from previous, or is it just because of the increase, the 10%?
Well, the 10% you can see. So when you look at the effect, basically, if you look under column J and row 53, you can see that we're about 2.1 million is what the revenue is,
Okay.
right? Okay, and about 170 in meter revenue. And if you were to have a 10% increase, that's lifting that by basically $200,000. A little bit, a little bit more than that, because you've got some increase in the meter revenue as well. So yeah, so you're getting about let's make it 220. That's kind of what you're getting as an additional revenue source in 1 year. But you've also got, like I said, as Director Kaiser showed, a lot of these had 54% of the operating costs alone is wages. And we've got 2023 is we know what we're getting there because the agreement was at 2%, but in 2024 it will, we're seeing higher settlements with the union and workforce than 2%. So, and I have, I've got certain items in here. I got inflationary consideration at 3.5% for these outer years, 2024, 25. Do they get it back down to 2? Maybe that's too high. So there's some of those numbers as well that I've got a when I looked at my historical thing, average of 3.5% over a long period of time is not unreasonable for inflation. But that's, again, those are some of those things that are not perfect. I can't tell you exactly that that's what it will be. But I think it's important to have an inflationary factor going on, because if you don't, then and there's surprises.
And the big carry forward project that I was referring to, which may have been confusing, sorry, was a sewer project. So it's the sewer lining project,
Okay.
which is being carried forward. There's not a lot of carry forward in the water from last year. So that's all new capital expenses.
Okay.
And then the rest of these are just, the water line replacement would just be water lines as they are aging out. You start doing more synergy projects and replacing them, as you said, when we get some sort of mapping and asset management, seeing what ages, what things are, replacing those in West Trail, East
Well,
Trail.
yes, that's true. But even some of those aren't even being touched on. So the big one was the what's it called there? The
Charles Lakes Drive.
Charles Lakes Drive. And then the other is like the $20 million project of dealing with getting the water line up to the West Trail.
The bins to look out.
Yes, bids look good. Yes, bids to look good.
And recognizing that that is a what's called an order of magnitude cost estimate. So there's a big gap there. It's like minus 15 to plus 75, you know, it's a huge range. So as we move these things forward and there's advancements in technology and ways that we can put these things together, we could recognize some cost savings there. However, as you've seen with the, you know, with any construction project right now, costs are just out of control, right? So, I mean, costs could be higher as well. We're hoping that technology is advancing in our favor and can save us some money in these long-term forecasts, but that's what our water system master plan will provide us with, a little more solid cost estimating as far as that goes. So, you know, we did a job, I'm just going to try that. We just did a job in 2019 on Iris Crescent. We replaced 230 meters of water sewer. We did some minor storm enhancements. So that was a synergy project, and that worked out to be about $3,500 a meter in 2019. The easiest construction you'll ever do on trail. So that was an easy job, super simple, nothing too difficult about it. And the cost is, you know, when I say $3,500 a meter, now imagine I just looked at the other day 5,000 meters of sewer mains that need to be enhanced because they're undersized, you know. So you try and wrap your head around those costs, and it's just overwhelming, you know. So you know, CEO McClure is trying to just average these things out throughout the years and try to make it palatable. But unfortunately, we have to try and keep up with these inflationary costs and the realities of putting pipe in the ground. So hopefully that answered your question, and I didn't babble on there.
And again, just as an example, just to discuss things. So like if we're at a 10% and that gets about $200,000, if you were to drop it to say 5%, then you're looking at $100,000. Is that going to make a difference as far as things go in 2023? Probably not per se, but it is anytime that you do have the benefit of any compounding that goes on. You haven't had any benefit of compounding going on because you've had such little increases over the last 6 years. Now I only went back to 2016 sort of thing, so I don't know what's going on there, but it is something that works both ways.
And that's, the revenue doesn't just cover, you know, regular O&M and capital. You need that buffer there because there's always emergent items. You're never going to get on top of it in time, right? So the water break on Charles Lakes Drive that we had 2 years ago, which has some significant impact to Sunningdale residents and the East Trail users, you know, that was a $100,000 plus repair. So when that happens, you know, we have 5-8 water breaks a year we're out there repairing, and all of those repairs, it always seems like the water main break happens after hours or on a weekend, so everything is down on overtime costs, right? Water breaks never happen at 7 in the morning and they never finish at 3 in the afternoon. They always happen in the most inopportune times, so they're expensive. So you also have to factor that into the equation, that you also need that buffer, because it takes one water break and well, there goes my capital budget, so, or my capital plan, because all of a sudden CEO and the player's like, yeah, you're out of line, so. Hopefully we don't get there, but we gotta factor that into the equation as well, so.
Well, here's an interesting question, and it might be not that interesting, but the replacement of fire hydrants. It seems to me that that should be regional.
Well, the fire hydrants are independently owned by each municipality and water user.
Okay,
So there was, maybe that thought might be moving back a few years where there was a regional incentive to actually maintain your fire hydrants.
mhm,
Because a lot of municipalities weren't doing maintenance on the prescribed frequency. And not that we were alone in that, so the regional district was paying or giving municipalities a both or a benefit to actually service their hydrants to keep them all up to date. And I believe that at the time, Chief Martin was the push behind that, so thank you for that.
oh,
But however, that is just part of your water utility.
oh, it is, okay. Okay, it's just kind of separated out there, and I thought that was,
Yeah, so we have some hydrants, which are 4-inch fire hydrants, and they're actually hooked onto 6-inch water mains, and a 6-inch fire hydrant is the standard, so they have to be upgraded. For insurance purposes as well as functioning as far as the fire service requires.
Lots to absorb. I know, Counselor, I appreciate that, and that's why I wanted to have this meeting, and I know that, one of the focuses is just on 2023, so again, like I said, it's not like if you say this is the increase, that's what we will work with, but it's not gonna go away, we need to, as a team, we're gonna have to try to figure out how we're going to fund this, and it's, you hope for some grant money. Again, they don't really like to fund, hey, we gotta replace your water lines. It's like, well, why weren't you replacing your water lines all along? Or what, those sorts of things. It'd be one thing, you'd be like, well, hey, we've got a new technology or a new way of getting this, or a new reservoir that might do X, save this. Those are sorts of things that you can maybe get some grant funding for, but a lot of times some of these are just, you collected revenues or not enough revenues and you need to upgrade it. And number of communities I know, 20 years ago had to double what was happening on what they were doing. They also kind of created a work crew because the prices they were getting from contractors was high. There was an ability to kind of get equipment and get staff trained. That's not easy, and been hard to even attract employees that have those skill sets, to come into the municipality. But that's some ways that people have done that. Now, again, that doesn't work if you've got a busy intersection. You need someone like a bigger company that says, I need to have 20 guys there with 10 pieces of equipment, and they're going to get that done and cleaned up in a week. Whereas some of these other ones, you can kind of say, well, we've got our staff on it, but it might take all summer. So you're getting phone calls that, hey, I've got gravel still in my thing since June, and it's September. You guys still aren't done because they got pulled off to deal with something at parks or pulled off to do something else on a different project. So there's different ways of tackling it. I know that we've got a small crew that can help out, but mostly they're there for sort of those repair work pieces. It's not always conducive on a 7-hour day, for the crews to go in and kind of deal with some of those projects. Sometimes it can be better to say, okay, someone's got a contract to come and do this if it's big enough, come and bid on it and get it done for the city.
so what would be the next step for us?
Again, I was hoping for some direction, and again, too, whether or not you even want to pick off a couple of them, like, where does, increasing, the garbage $5, where does that fit with people? What does, again, I think I've got $13 and you got people popping up here on the screen. Again,
Yeah, you said 13.
is it? Um, So again, here, oh, not doing very good at my math there. It's not a $483 monthly change. It's supposed to be $4.83, so not to freak everyone out. But you can see there that the water rate increase would be low. This is again before any discount. So there would be a bit of a break, those that paid by the discount date on this increase, but you can see it's 40, 13, and 5, and that would be, again, 10% increase to water, 5% to sewer, and a 3.5% increase to resource recovery. And if I go to here, this slide, I think in particular, for me is the one that, you know, is one of the reasons why we're facing some of the challenges that we're facing. So, you know, and again, totally makes sense that in certain years there, with, you know, COVID and things like that, that we would be cognizant of not wanting to increase rates, but it's
Colin,
yes,
Council, or CAO, would
Yes.
you flip back to the first one?
certainly.
So could you talk a little bit about the flat rate when it comes to water and what that increasing, I mean, that's
Yeah.
40 right now?
Yeah, and again, that's no increase to the flat rate.
Yeah, so what about if we looked at like increasing the flat rate versus a percentage increase like that? Because I'll be perfectly frank, the 10 doesn't sit well with me.
Right.
The sewer sits fine.
Okay.
The resource recovery, I could see slightly small, lower amount, but
Yeah.
$1, but yeah, I think if we look at the water rate by tackling the flat rate or whatever it's referenced as, it would probably be a better way to go. And I mean, when we can look at other communities going into 2023 with what they've done, I mean, that would put our sewer in line with others, that would put our garbage in line with others, and hopefully we could bring our water down to be not at par, because I recognize there's jobs to be done, but bringing it more into a palatable workplace.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, one of the factors again, that I was saying, Councilor Butler, is that you've missed out on the compounding effect. Like if someone had gone 4%, 4%, and that compounded over time, you're not necessarily looking at 10% today, or, you know, even if I said it was at 3s, right, that compounding effect. And that's one of the things that you will push off, is that yes, you may get the flat rate goes up and you know, it has that, yes, it's there, but it's not gonna compound on, and I think you're, based on what we're seeing on the deficit, we're gonna need some compounding effect, right? So, and again,
The flat rate though does seem to be a very equitable tax in a sense that, because we're not individually metering properties,
yeah,
it's sort of up to the individual how much concrete they want to wash. So,
yeah, well, I mean, again, we have nothing in any of our, I mean, again, I shouldn't say that, those that are metered, that have the kind of commercial meters,
the
they,
commercial,
yeah, they're the ones that are kind of, able to affect their usage to kind of adjust what they pay. But that homeowner that's, you know, that amount for their water, whether it's like, again, you're right, it's this plus, you know, the parcel taxes on top of that, right? So you're right. And so when you say that, it's definitely, has a dollar attached to it. But one of the things that we forget is, if you have water that has been pumped up and treated and pumped to all these places and comes back down to your house, the cost of that is significant. And again, we're only really here only covering the operating costs and not dealing with capital. And like I said, my opinion is, just looking at this, because I come in new, is that this concern, I think, of what the sticker shock looks like is kind of what is also resulted in why this council, maybe because I show up and say like, hey, because again, we can probably go back to
no,
what
I'll be the first to, I feel that historically council and trail has always erred on the lower side when they shouldn't have been. And I think that's an issue that this council will be faced with correcting, being a new council. So you're absolutely right. Your assumption is correct.
Anyway, we can look at it different ways. I'm not concerned with that, but either way, it would be an increase, whether it's gonna be on that parcel tax component or it's gonna be on the rate here. Like I said,
I was just trying to more even it out between different values of property.
Yeah.
Properties, you know.
well, but even here, that's the
That's
thing,
the-
because it's a flat rate, so it's not like it's gonna,
Yeah.
you know, it's a flat rate on whether or not you're paying your parcel tax or a flat rate on whatever your water usage is, you get that. That's that bill that you have. It's not, like we were saying, which may be different. It's like, well, if I'm increasing the tax rate and I've got a higher valued home, in theory, you know, I'm able to absorb that more than the person's got a lower valued home, kind of that regressive tax they talk about, sort of thing, progressive on values, but that is something certainly that doesn't come into play here because we've got a flat rate. And again, it's one of the other pieces that we also struggle with. Because we've had a discussion, as Director McIsaac said, on the business case of metering everybody. Because then you would say, well, okay, well, Colin, you've got a meter on your home and you've got a family of 4. You're gonna use more water, but my, lady next door, who's a widow, she's gonna use less. But one of the challenges that we certainly faced was the amount of capital that's involved in these utilities needs almost like a flat rate anyway. It's almost like even if you had a variable rate that might help us out with the power or with chlorine treatment or those sorts of things, those variable costs that are in these utilities that are it's far more difficult because you're going to need a flat rate just to be able to cover the basic fixed costs, whether or not that's just knowing that we've got 3 people that work at the water treatment plant full time, and you've got capital that needs to be done, and then now you're only playing with the fact that, well, maybe out of that rate, $100 might be variable, where I might pay $150 and my widow neighbor might only pay $50, but in the end, you still need to collect the same amount of money to kind of fund what needs to be done on infrastructure. And again, I'm not trying to be a bearer of bad news, but I think it's just a realistic look at what's going to happen here. And again, I know other communities are also facing this and facing increased costs, and it's not just us, and timing isn't great and that sort of thing. So, like, these are some of the ideas that I would have for today.
So I would just propose that if we could try to bring water into more of a 8 or 8.5, leave sewer as you suggested. Garbage. Basically where you brought it up, I think those are numbers that are reasonable.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Maybe just a tiny bit down on the garbage collection.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, we can figure that out.
Could we do like a couple of scenarios?
Absolutely, I can, yes.
Yeah.
And in fact, if you want, this is the beauty of some of these things is that I can, if you give me a couple of ideas, we can have a bit of a break and I can
Okay.
come back with it. So,
Okay.
like within 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay.
But it would be good to know what scenarios you.
Well, if we did, Yeah.
8.5, and then what's just for the garbage at $5, that equals to a 4? I forgot the percentage you attached to that one.
Okay, apologize, Councilor.
But it was me.
Yeah, so I've got a 10% increase in water.
Yeah.
5% in sewer,
That's fine.
and then a 3.5 in.
Yeah, so if you bring the 3 down to 3 and 8 on the water.
So 3, and so again, does I could happily do that. So 3% on resource. 8% water,
And sewer remains the same.
same at the 5%.
can we see a 7.5 and an 8.5 for the water as well?
Well, now you're just like.
Just to, you know.
Yeah.
You just seem so confident and be able to.
Well, no, all you have to do is plug it in, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
spit it out.
just
In fact, we could, if I could, I could actually probably.
Should we take a small recess?
Yeah, we can. I can also just almost do it on the screen.
Sure.
Right, so you could take a look at
Yeah.
what that means. I mean, again, just remembering that. Like literally at 10% you're at 40. So if you're at 5% you're at 20.
Yeah.
Right. So we're gonna be, at 26 kind of thing if
Yeah.
you're at that. But I mean, I'm happy to tell you what it looks like. Again, as you can see, it isn't gonna matter much on the numbers that go out on some of
I think
these.
it's more optics though. Like,
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
double digit. I think we're all kind of saying we don't want to go double digit.
Yeah,
right now.
yeah, yeah.
So.
No, I respect that
that's-
completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not that it's unreasonable, it certainly isn't, the way you proposed it.
And then, yeah,
So, I mean, the quick one here is that if you're just looking at 23 for water, and I think the right off the bat was, I think, sorry. If we were at 8%.
Mhm.
So you're looking at basically at 8%, you're looking at a $32 increase.
Hmm.
So. Uh, 7.5 is a $30 increase. And I think, you said, I think, 8.5. Councillor Pence?
Mhm.
So 34.
Thank you.
Try to guess it.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that you are. So like I said, again, too, you know, if you're at, when we're in here, I could do anything on that sort of side. Again, the effect on this is, you know, you're going from 337,000 being available for capital at 8.5%.
337 and 8.5.
Yeah, and then 371. So again, the overall effect, you know, so you're going from 371 to 337. So we're looking at 37,000. That's what the effect is on that 2.5%.
Better than.
displaying on the screen if you were hoping to,
Oh,
because you have to close your PowerPoint.
okay.
You can get that to this point.
And I don't know if I
Like
could
that was
see that
available
part
for-
either.
Where was the place where it was available?
So, council, again, too, I just, I don't know, on that side. If you, as an example, on the garbage side, there are 3,400 homes. So again, if you were to lower it by $1 or whatever it is, or however that sort of thing, so that's kind of the savings you get is 34. Basically, it's, let's say $3,400 kind of thing. It would be what the difference is. And again, so whether or not you want to be at $5 or $3, those sorts of things, and again, that's not difficult. It's something, it's manageable. I certainly don't think on the resource recovery or on garbage, that's not, it's really not one. I think it's, there's an area that you are wanting to, you know, save a few dollars on. That will probably be one that we would be able to handle. Again, for me, the water and sewer rates is just an inevitability that we're gonna have to get there, but I do appreciate that you're the ones that are, well, I'll probably get some phone calls too, don't worry. But that's the area where I think that you've got the largest area of concern, and water is the one that definitely has the because again, even to there, it's not like you can go in and run down like that shear in place for sewer. It's because you're dealing with, you know, 6, 8, 10, 12-inch line sort of thing, and it's like this. It's not, you know, your water line that's only a few inches, and it's pretty hard to go in and shear that sort of thing if you're trying to fix it. So. Okay.
Can you edit that screen that you're in right now?
Yes,
what was that,
I just,
Paul?
I just did.
If you can edit that screen.
I did. do you want me to, what were you thinking again too? Is council thinking that 8% and $32 would be something that would be a bit more?
35, actually. 35 was coming out, that was 8.5, wasn't it?
Yeah, around 34, but yeah, so. I can.
So change, yearly change of $58.
Yeah,
So you would lower that by $7 for
so you're thinking that you would like to see them doing this. Oh. Malfunction.
Your PowerPoint presentation is still overwhelming the screen, so it's not showing what you're looking at.
There.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, sorry guys. Here was. Thinking that it's going on there.
Yeah, that's okay.
Doesn't seem to be happy with that. Sorry.
And so usually happen in. Because, yeah, we get these posted.
That's what you kind of.
Not everyone gets required.
And sorry, on garbage, we were thinking.
What were we thinking for the garbage?
Like you did 34,
Well, that was at 8.5.
and garbage, you said, are we on mute right now, Colin?
We're not. Sorry, do you want me to?
Should this stuff be on mute?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, again, we're just working through things. It's a bit not.
Do you feel that you would be able to work with a $3 in that number? With the contracts with the provider, or?
We will work whatever we need to do, right? I mean, again, we had some savings last year on spring and fall cleanup, right? So that might be something that we have to. Have some savings on.
We wouldn't be entertaining getting rid of those services.
No. Just thinking that when we look back, and so forgive me, so when we talk about that.
So then maybe change the hydro for. Years. Mhm.
I appreciate this because I know how stressful it is when we have to type in front of like
All these eyes.
everybody and on.
Yeah, like the moving the screens moving on me. It's like, yeah. So it was a 4, right?
Yeah. So that's a $51 ticket.
Yeah, thanks.
Well,
Sorry, guys, I know
It's
it's
4.25. Yeah, 4.25, you're right. $4.25. There we go.
So I don't know if that makes people,
Well,
Comfortable,
you know,
or-
I think it's a good sort of common ground that we can come to, and also just recognizing that increases have to be made, but also not to overload everyone's system in this overall.
Yep.
And as long as you feel comfortable with it as well. I mean,
I know this is my first go around, and like I was saying, you know. This is our first working together, and I need to be able to, I think, kind of show as we do go through the budget and as we go get results, and as we. And maybe with Director McIsaac on getting him on his asset management plan, some of these things will take some time, but our proof will be in the pudding, I think, as we go through this, and I know that it's not the best way to be. Presenting or getting you guys working on things under the sort of pressure thing because of where we're at with the election and all the rest of it, and kind of where we're behind on the finances and getting things audit done and all that sort of stuff. I mean, I do note that, you know, Castlegar's looking at a 6.67% tax increase, and I think about $45 increase on their utilities overall as well. You know, so, and not that that's a reason that we do things, but just understanding in our community the pressure that they're, you know, we're under for the increased cost of concrete and for pipe and for labor and all of these things that are coming. It plays out, and it also plays out significantly if we have not had just sort of even inflationary compounding increases. And again, part of that is, I think, you know, the desire of council to make it affordable here, right? And not that it's not that the $4.25 per month, and again, we sometimes joke, and I'm not trying to make it a joke, but if it's a coffee each month that you forego, that again, make sure that you've got
you're giving
all
up
the,
something.
right, yes, you're giving up something, but that means that all the water you want kind of comes to your home, and you take away your waste and you pick up your garbage, right? So on utility side, it's pretty reasonable.
Mhm.
And again, it's a trust factor for me that you let me work on this on your finances, and we'll just get better at this, and again, get another year under our belt, and yeah, it's again, part of this is a makeup, I think, from a number of years of not probably have.
There we go.
So it's a pretty quiet.
Do we have to vote tonight, or? It was over?
It's not necessarily a vote, but it'd be one of those things too, that if we walk in for setting the rates in January 9th and someone says, can we do this? We can, and we just delay certain.
We have to get those numbers have to be pretty solidified
Yeah.
before them.
Right. And that's what I'm saying.
Because we want to get out.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But,
Because we do want to be able to have enough in time so that the discount can be offered to
Right.
homeowners.
So the goal would be is that we have January 9th, we would come back with the rates for the first 3 readings. And then 2 days from then, we would have sort of a quick meeting and just do a quick, approval of that, and then we can get the bills.
Fair enough.
So it'd be kind of in that January, that's 11th, I should say. So I don't know, Councilor Wilson, you seem pretty quiet back there. Councilor Castro, you're also very quiet. That's not a common thing for us, so.
No, it's not, CAO McClure, but I'm just digesting, okay, and processing.
Okay.
And I appreciate all the information. Thank you, Director McIsaac as well, for a very nice presentation.
Thank you.
For me, just, I don't know what I don't know, so
Yes.
maybe from Director McIsaac and your worship and Councilor Butler, just. Is there anything we're missing from as we move?
I don't think so. That's why I said, I kind of like this, the way it's laid out in front of us, because we have a really good idea of what's coming in the future. I wish we could sort of, have a, little bit of time to think about it. I know that if we make a decision tonight, I mean, this is a public meeting, right? So
I mean,
it will go out.
yeah, well, again.
It will go out,
Yeah.
and so we're basically deciding tonight, if we decide tonight, what it's going to be.
Yes, but it doesn't mean that, we get if council contacts me and say, hey, I want to have a special meeting first week of January, or I want to see a couple of different iterations. It doesn't mean that we can't do that.
Yeah,
I know that things have kind of been backed up here as far as what we've been handling and just with the year end not being done and the different things that we've been dealing with. It is not the best, but if I had been in place, we would have had some budget meetings in early November where I think it would have given you a bit more of a gap time. So I apologize for that. But it's sort of
And I was gonna say, I think it's challenging because, we're coming in here. As most of us new council, with, significant costs that need to be budgeted for and planned for. And, understanding that, the lack of increases over so many years, inflation has gone up, everything has gone up. However, nothing went up reflectively to cover those costs. We're now having to be faced with that point where we're trying to play catch up. And it's now falling on all of us to do that. And it's, exciting to see things happen, but it's, also a challenge for us to going into this, making decisions, quickly.
Yeah.
But of course, because we have to, but, because of, not having those budgetary increases over those numerous years that put us in this position.
It's part of the factors, right? I mean, again, the compounding effect, and again, I recognize that it's the pressure that comes. I mean, again, we all live in this community, and you guys have to walk down the street and go into your store, and people are gonna ask, hey, what about this? But again, when I think about all the things that we take advantage of, and one of the things that I would use or discuss at length is things like, for example, the monthly charge that I pay at home for my internet and cell phone for my wife is basically the same thing that I pay monthly for my water and sewer bill. Now, if I took away my water and sewer bill for, if you took away my water and sewer, what kind of condition would I be in as compared to, what would happen if, my cell phone and my internet was gone, right? I mean, it is interesting how.
What cell phone are you on? This is a much better value than your cell phone sitting up there.
Well, I agree, I'm just saying.
Hand us the card.
On a monthly basis, I was just looking at the numbers, right? I mean, municipal taxes plus water and sewer were right around that kind of range of what my internet and my cell phone is, right? And it's just interesting because, you go into TELUS and say like, yeah, we don't want to pay $5 more, but yet TELUS kind of comes along and you just pay the new phone, you want the new iPhone. I mean, it's amazing how what we prioritize on the value that we actually get. For this,
Very good
right?
value for money.
It's absolutely great value for this, right? And yet, and again, I know it's hard to yell at a faceless corporation like TELUS and say, like, the rate that I'm getting for this is far too high, or you get people that visit from different countries and say, what are you guys paying for, phone bills and internet? But we get used to that's what the bill is and that's what we pay. And I just, like I said, I agree on the value that we pay for having as much water as you need at your door and taking away your waste. It's not that much. But it's not lost on me that for some people, any increase will be difficult, especially with inflationary times.
so what's the will of council? Do we want to make another meeting early in January and have another discussion?
Certainly can.
Okay,
And we're gonna be discussing what, if I may ask?
Well,
These numbers that you just posted? I thought we kind of went with this. This is what we're going for. Do we need to analyze this more or study this more? This is where we're.
I guess council was just making it, if that's what something
So
that council, if council wanted to do that, we
Yeah.
would make that happen. That's all. But again, at some point in time, we gotta make a decision and part of it is, like I said, I know, I heard, like Counselor Martin say, a lot to digest. So there's nothing wrong with, we probably need a shorter meeting kind of thing, right? And if it's just like, as I look through these numbers, what do I see?
But for tonight, CEO McClure, we can maybe vote on this proposal for these increases. I mean, you've given us a lot to digest, but a lot of these numbers are capital costs, right? That
Yes.
are estimates at best,
Yes.
and they're projected over 5 years,
Yes.
even though we're talking. I mean, that's the part that's kind of got me, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Sidetracked here a little bit, if I can say that.
Yep.
This is quite palatable.
Okay.
And I'd like to think maybe we could, I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there, we could maybe pass this tonight. I think those are reasonable.
Well, I think
numbers.
part of it is just giving the direction so that
Yeah.
when I come back on the different numbers, that someone doesn't go, can we change this? That's because that makes it difficult because we could do it, but you just have.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that for sure, thank you.
Can we just maybe take 5 minutes before we go on, just
Yes.
a little
Yes.
quiet time to.
Yeah.
It's like our first big decision. Is that okay? No, just a minute.
You're okay? Numbers, yeah. The 8.5. That's $3 difference than what Castle Bar raised theirs.
Well, and Castlegar has been working at, again, their plan, and it's one of the things that in meeting with CAOs that they also kind of came and had an infrastructure deficit, and that's where they went out and borrowed, and they had a certain rate that's going on for ongoing to kind of, they did all of that Main Street and some of the art they put in and the boulevards and all of that sort of thing. And again, yeah, I mean, that's the part of me that I feel it's a bit lacking here. That I don't have a better plan that you can say, okay, I see where this is going and have confidence there. But again, this for me, it's not lost on me that it's more money. But I also know that without, as we look at those lack of rate increases over a number of years, that's a factor, 1 or 2% more on those timeframes, and you're probably gonna have.
What would borrowing cost?
Well, it's a good question, and that is something again.
Because what I want to make sure is that whatever we borrow, whatever increase, I remember those costs. Yeah, that's my concern too. Right.
And I think that
It's kind of like a
as
negative.
Council Cashel said, kind of here today gets us kind of tied up. We know what our plan is for 2023. It's reasonable. Those are the kind of the next level answers is, what do we end up?
So could we make that 8.5 and the 5% for this year? Knowing that it's going to increase to 10% or,
Well, again, we will deal with that in a year. I mean, the one thing.
You don't
for me is
have
that
to
if you-
answer
Yeah,
what we're
just,
doing
yeah,
next year.
it doesn't mean that, again, when you look at this, you are not committing to anything on this year.
Okay.
Because like this was for the homeowner, because over the line number or whatever it is these days. So it's like I think share with you, but I think it's just shifting in time. Because we actually receive the money coming calls.
Right.
So it's not like we're
Should rename it.
the one that I don't agree with, it's the one that you can get under 18. When your kids are under 18.
okay, so does council, do we need more time, you guys?
No.
Does somebody want to make a motion?
Well, I can. So as proposed on the
Okay.
screen.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the proposal is the 8.5
Yes,
percent.
Yeah.
Sorry, and the 5.
for water and sewer, and then whatever percentage.
Whatever that works out as a percentage form, yeah.
Okay.
I think I just have a question. I think that, yes, sorry. Yes, can you hear us? Director McIsaac?
I can certainly hear you. I was
Okay.
just suggesting that for the benefit of the viewing public, because this will be recorded and posted to our YouTube site. It would be very helpful if you could recap what it is you're looking at, because we cannot
Okay.
see your screen. So
Okay.
we've been able to hear quite clearly that it's an 8.5% increase for water, 5% for sewer, but I haven't been able to catch what the proposed increase that you're presently looking at for garbage would be.
Okay. Yes, and it'll be $4 and.
4%, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
it was $4. I think it's 2.83 or the, sorry.
So the resource recovery at $4.
Is 2.8%, but I apologize and thank you for putting your hand up, Director McIsaac. I will, I should have just shared the screen. Would have been probably the way I should have done it here. Can you see that now, Director McIsaac?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
So that will be captured in the recorded version of the meeting.
Is it showing up there now? Hey, but something's happening there. I think we've got too much pressure on the,
Okay, so the motion is for 8.5,
There we go. Yes,
5% and 2.8% on resource recovery.
that's correct. Just bear with me for a moment because I noticed when I.
And was it Councillor Cashel who had made the motion?
Butler,
Councillor Butler,
And was there a seconder?
not yet.
I'll second.
Councillor Benson is seconding it.
Just trying to get this on the screen. Director McIsaac, and thank you. I should have done that earlier. I thought I was actually. And can you see that now, Director McIsaac, on your side from video?
Yes, I'm seeing the proposed 2023 residential utility rates showing overall increases at the bottom of
Yes.
816 for the 2022 actual to 867 for the 2023 proposed. Net change of $51
Correct.
and the net monthly change of $425. Yes.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you for letting me know that because my screen's saying something else in here. But no, that's great. And yeah, I don't know where council's at for, we've got that on the table
Mhm,
to direct
it's on the
staff
table.
to prepare the rates.
So is there any other questions or comments before we go for the vote? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed, unanimous.
So,
Thank you,
okay.
guys.